Chapter 424. What is it? The Curse of the Orcs, Caesar said. The Curse of the Orcs? Stannis pondered for a moment and said, This is the history of the Second Age. It has been almost 2,000 years since then. The water in it may be deeper and murkier than Quell Dorii. You see, aren't the orcs living well in the Northern Empire now? Why do you want to open up history and care about these old things? It won't do you any good. I just want to care. The black dragon looked down at the city below the court. His body was very close, but his voice was very far away. His tone was unquestionable. Caesar was not interested in many things, but there were some things that he could not forget. The curse of the orcs had always been engraved in his heart. It was like a shadow in his mind that he could not get rid of. In the past, he did not have the right nor the ability to care about these things. But now that the little black baby had grown up and became one of the largest and tallest mountains in Iradia, he wanted to care about it now. All right, as you wish. Stannis gave in. The tense atmosphere brought about by the black dragon relaxed. He closed his eyes. Caesar saw a divine reaction appear around him. After a short wait, an invisible substance rushed into the golden dragon's head. Soon, Stannis opened his eyes again. After a flash of daze, he nodded and said, His Majesty Bahamut has agreed to your request. Tell me, including the history of the fall of the Orc Empire. If you want to listen to this story, you have to be patient. The story is very long, and I have to seal this space now to prevent the sound from reaching the ears of other gods. You don't mind, do you? Are you sure you know all this? Just now, His Majesty Bahamut gave me a part of his memory. Those things were like my own experience. All the details flowed before my eyes. Of course, it is not a problem for me to tell you. These things are enough for you to understand that part of history, and even the curse of the orcs. I'll listen carefully, Caesar said. To understand the ancient Aradia orcs, we must first start with their god, Gosh, Stannis said slowly. Gush was a violent, ferocious, brave, and warlike orc main god. Nowadays, people generally think that he only had one eye, but this was not the case thousands of years ago. At that time, this god had both eyes intact, but one of his eyes was shot out by the main god of the elves, Carry-Lon, in a fierce battle. Thus, until now, the orcs and elves have been exceptionally jealous of each other. Stannis glanced at the black dragon and interrupted. The orcs under your command can actually coexist peacefully with the elves in the west. This is simply unbelievable to outsiders. Go on. Caesar didn't explain and waited for her to continue. In the next few battles, Gawushin finally got his eyeball back, but Carry-Lon's divine power made it impossible for him to heal. So this god decided to give the eyeball as a gift to his favorite people in the Endless Realms, the Iradia orcs. The Eye of Gawushin was an extremely rare creation of a true god, and its power was unstoppable. After that, the Iradia orcs grew rapidly and even established an empire that no one could stop at that time, the Skalon Orc Empire. At that time, all races had to bow down to the ancient orcs, but in ancient times, due to the limitations of the development of the era, communication and transportation had theoretical borders, and the Skalon Northern Dynasty's ruling power couldn't radiate to further areas. During the 700 years of the Skalon Empire's rule, the self-awareness of the Iradia humans began to awaken. These hard-working humans formed many settlements in the south, which was suitable for reproduction, and then gradually evolved into developed city-states, and finally into a unified regime, the Undying Empire. At that time, our fathers had finally chased the Titans out of Iradia and needed a long time to recuperate. What the giant dragons didn't expect was that in the short time they were dormant, these humanoid races would prosper at a speed that was incomprehensible to the long-lived species. When they woke up, they could only watch as the Skalon Orc Empire and the Undying Empire firmly occupied this vast land. The orcs and humans became the main characters of the Second Era. At the end of the Second Era, the Skalon Empire broke out in an all-out war with the Undying Empire in order to find a better place to live. I know about that war. In the end, the orcs were defeated. Caesar said, Yes, but the process wasn't that simple. At the beginning of the war, the Skalon Empire was unstoppable. They even crossed the inland sea and pushed their army to the Mykantius Plains, attacking the main city of the Undying Empire. At that time, the Skalon Empire was much stronger than the Undying Empire in terms of population, army, and number of spellcasters. But they still lost in the end. Black Dragon shook his head. Two large-scale battles turned the situation around. The bloody setting sun of Everlasting City and the sunset calamity of the Mykantius Plains. In the bloody setting sun battle, the Undying Empire was forced into a desperate situation. They had no choice but to fight with all their might. They had to defend the Everlasting City. As for the gods, they were led by the sun god Pyro, the war god Quel'Khazad, the earth goddess Chauntea, and the guardian Joy Dawn and other righteous gods. Stannis paused. The golden dragon's ability to teach others was well known. He couldn't help but digress. You must be very confused. Why would a great god like Pyro choose to stand on the side of the humans this time? Because the rumors are true. Every emperor of the Undying Empire is a descendant of the gods. The blood of the sun god flows in the Lemorhian family. So the orcs lost because of the gods? Caesar asked. Of course not. At that time, many gods were watching the Battle of Iradia. With the orc king god Gush as the leader, the queen of spiders Lolth, the goddess of night Shar, and the seven evil gods, Wrath, Massacre, Misfortune, and Revenge, all joined the orc camp. The gods fought in the sky, and the orcs and humans fought on the ground. If the bloody setting sun battle was in the astral plane, it would not be impossible to turn it into the twilight of the gods. Stannis sighed. The failure of the Skalon dynasty in the bloody setting sun battle was due to one of the tribe's chiefs. Azak's bones break. Caesar continued. The desire for power drove Azak's crazy. He desperately wanted to take the Eye of Gush for himself and steal the power of the divine object into his beloved short axe. He succeeded. The axe was filled with great power and was sublimated, but the Orc Empire's important battle strategy was declared a failure. In the end, the Eye of Gush fell into silence, and the Bonesbreak tribe was also exterminated as traitors. Stannis' eyes lit up. You actually know about that part of history. The legendary weapon, Azak's Bloodthirst. I obtained it, Caesar said calmly. The battle axe was still in the hands of Hogg, and even became a symbol of power in the Blackwing Empire. I also have some understanding of the Battle of Mykantius. Continue. Losing the Eye of Gush meant the failure of the bloody setting sun battle. The last emperor of the Orc dynasty, Kinrit Skalon, had no choice but to give up his plans to attack and temporarily retreat. At this time, the initiative had already shifted to the hands of the humans. The Undying Empire, who knew about this, did not stop the war, but chose to pursue the victory. After a year of small-scale battles, both sides unanimously chose the open Great Plains of Mykantius and poured all their forces into the final battle. Chapter 425. For 3 whole months, both sides continued to send troops to Mykantius. There were small skirmishes, but no large-scale battle broke out. This was because no one was certain of the outcome of this battle. The Scarron dynasty and the Unfalling Empire had been making their final preparations. It wasn't until the 21st day of year 1031 of the Second Era that the apocalypse of the setting sun finally began. I don't need to elaborate on the process. There were many details that even the Platinum Dragon God didn't know. We only know that the first flames of war were ignited in Sharnwood. The battlefield spread across the Ganges River, the Maigao Hills, the Brewster Mountains, and the vast areas with Mykantius as the core. In just 6 months, the total number of casualties on both sides had exceeded 1 million. The turning point of the war came on the 194th day of year 1032. At that time, the Scarron dynasty's troops had already gained the advantage in the battlefield of Mykantius, but the giants suddenly rebelled on that day. As one of the 6 main battle tribes, the giants gave up on defending the Ganges River. The 3 legendary giant leaders led their clansmen to attack the neighboring Bloodsong clan, Silvering clan, and Sentinel clan. At that time, An elite army of the unfalling empire was led by the Valkyrie Shiluan and smoothly crossed the battlefield. They went upstream from the Ganges River to Mycantheus and launched a pincer attack on the Scaron clan from the rear. Why did the giants rebel? Caesar asked. According to your description, the Ganges River was a strategic location that had to be defended. It could easily affect the situation of the battlefield of Mycantheus. If he didn't trust them enough, why would the Orc Emperor give this place to the giants? Moreover, the giants' position in the Scaron dynasty wasn't low. This doesn't make sense. It does make sense. Stannis swung his claws. However, the dragons only played the role of bystanders at that time. No one knows what happened at that time. It could be the unfalling empire's promise of benefits, or the giants' dissatisfaction with the Orc dynasty, or it could be purely because of their wild nature. In any case, they did indeed rebel at the crucial moment. To this day, Iradia still has some rumors about this matter, but most of them are groundless guesses and nonsense. After losing the main battle in the Mycantheus Plains, the Orcs no longer had the ability to launch an all-out attack against the humans. The foundation of the Scalan dynasty is located in the north, which is now the Theron Gobi, the Black Rock Mountains, and the vast area north of the Wild Green Fields. The Mycantheus Plains is close to the unfallen empire in the south. Such an expedition has made defense an extravagant hope for the Orcs. They have fallen into the constant pursuit of the humans. Most of the beastmen scattered all over Iradia are remnants of that time. What is worth admiring is that Kenrit Scaron didn't use witchcraft to escape. This Orc Emperor led the warriors of the Scaron clan and died in the Cutty Hark Valley of the Mycantheus Plain. His death also marked the end of this dynasty that had lasted for 700 years. The Dawn Legion of the Unfallen Empire chased the remnants of the Orc army all the way to the north. After a few crucial but not difficult battles, the humans captured the main city of the Scalan dynasty, Victory. The time was year 1034, day 65 of the Second Iradia era. This day was the end of the Second Era and also the beginning of the Third Era. On the same day, the Dawn Legion's Valkyrie Shiluan committed suicide in the center tower of Victory. She was the last Valkyrie of the Unfallen Empire. After that, the humans never mentioned this title again. There should be enough stories to write a book. Caesar said. That's right. Stannis agreed and then sighed. It's a pity that there are very few related records. Not only are we unable to find records of the Scalan dynasty, even the Unfallen Empire has very little information about this war. I have a rough understanding of what you're saying. Caesar said, during this period of time, the Blackwing Empire has also been collecting information in this area, but all the related content came to an abrupt end. I couldn't find any records related to the Orc curse. Of course, otherwise you wouldn't have begged His Majesty Bahamut for an explanation. Stannis smiled. The real secret definitely wouldn't appear in any text or picture records. Only a few people would keep it here. Stannis tapped his own forehead. This information involves the gods. It was because of you that I received the favor of His Majesty Bahamut that I learned about these unknown things. After that, the Emperor of the Unfallen Empire, Augustus Lamorihan, gave the order to immediately begin the extermination of the giant tribe. He didn't accept any prisoners and didn't leave a single one alive. The traitors were eventually betrayed, and the giant tribe was exterminated under the relentless pursuit of the Unfallen Empire. Later on, when he was cleaning up the mess of the Scalan dynasty, Augustus obtained the unstoppable divine object from back then, the Eye of Gyush. Augustus had very conflicting emotions regarding this divine object. He hoped for the Eye of Gyush to recover, but he was also afraid that the power of Gyush's words would resurface. After some hesitation, he decided to take this divine object to Pyro's throne and seek guidance from a sun god. Pyro originally planned to destroy this ugly eyeball of the Orc god, but then the main god of the elves, Carillon, appeared. He told Pyro that this eyeball was closely related to Gyush and the Orcs. Now that the Iradia Orcs have yet to be completely exterminated, there's a possibility of them coming back for revenge. If you want your descendants to have a permanent position in this material plane, You should use it to do more things. Pyro, as one of the supreme gods with great divine power, can accomplish many things that Carillon can't. The suggestion of the elves moved Pyro, but the sun god was proud, just like a dragon. In the end, he didn't do anything ugly. He just casually erased the divine while left behind by Guish, then threw the eyeball back to Augustus for him to deal with. However, the most difficult thing to do with a divine object is to deal with the divine imprint within it. For Augustus, his ancestors had already helped him complete the most difficult step. Pyro left, but Carillon didn't. He and Guish were mortal enemies, and so were the elves and orcs. Of course, he hoped that all the orcs would go to hell to repent. Augustus gathered a group of excellent spellcasters from the unfallen empire, and under the guidance of the elven god Carillon, he used the Eye of Guish to cast a vicious blood curse on the Iradia orcs. Logically speaking, at this time, Guish should have been furious and jumped out to stop it. However, after the Scullon dynasty was defeated, Guish and his allies were also defeated on the battlefield of gods. For this reason, the main god of the orcs had no choice but to compromise with Pyro and look for a new material world to gather faith again. The Iradia orcs were abandoned. That's the end of the story. Stannis spread his wings slightly and said, "I believe that you have enough understanding. The curse of the orcs is actually the curse of the Eye of Guish. As long as it is resolved, the orcs will be able to return to the way they were in the Second Age. Your Majesty Tangerine, please begin to gather your army. Iradia's situation is grim now. We are gathering more allies, and I will contact you again soon." After saying this, the gold dragon spread his heavy metal wings and prepared to leave. "Wait." Caesar frowned and asked him to stop. "You still haven't told me where the Eye of Guish is." Augustus is known as the Iron Emperor. After the curse was completed and the Eye of Guish was hidden, he immediately began to hunt down all the spellcasters who participated in the curse. He also ordered the army to behead all the insiders. The secret of the Eye of Guish has never been recorded. It has only been passed down by word of mouth in the Lamorhian family. Stannis said, "In other words, to solve this problem, I have to ask the Emperor of Never-Setting Sun?" Caesar said unhappily, "Under normal circumstances, yes." Stannis flapped his wings, and his 4 limbs were already off the ground. The strong wind caused all the flowers and plants to tilt and rustle. However, His Majesty Bahamut knows that one of the insiders survived, and he also knows where that person is now. However, I can only tell you this information after I've dealt with Monet. Don't worry, we metal dragons never go back on our word. That's fine. Caesar thought for a moment, nodded, and brought Garen back. I hope the information you spit out won't disappoint me. I won't see you out. Chapter 426. 3 days later, Caesar finished inspecting the army that was ready to go and returned to the palace. His huge body was slowly shrinking. 50 meters was a terrifying number. No matter when, it was a silent deterrence. However, its huge size also brought about countless troubles in Caesar's daily life, even in the Blackwing Palace. The scale of this building was far larger than any ruler's residence in Iradia. It was built according to the standards of dragons, but no one thought that the Black Dragon Emperor would continue to grow. From common sense, a black dragon in the material plane could only grow to 25 meters. Even Caesar himself did not think of it. The palace would not change with the growth of his body. Now, it was difficult for him to move normally even here. The black dragon breathed deeply and became smaller silently. After entering the palace hall, his body had shrunk to 7 meters. He continued to move forward and gently pushed open the only door in the palace made of oak and vines. Caesar was stunned for a moment. Luna was curled up in her little nest and fell asleep. Usually, she was playing outside at this time, playing with her fairy friends in the sea of flowers, but these days were an exception. The little fellow's sleeping posture had always been bad, just like a child. Once she fell asleep, she was very unreserved. God knows how many times she had rolled, exposing her entire thigh. Her silk nightdress was full of wrinkles. She was lying on her stomach, hugging a velvet quilt under her body. The fireplace in the room was burning. The temperature in the north was always high, but there was still a fire here. Caesar felt that the temperature here could make ordinary people sweat and restless, but the little fellow was sleeping soundly. Luna had been saying that she was cold. At first, Caesar thought that she was sick, but after checking, he found that was not the case. The northern priest told him that the queen was in good health, even better than usual. Is it because of the child? Caesar thought. The black dragon's body became smaller. He walked over and pulled out the quilt, then stuffed the pillow next to him into her arms. The little fellow obviously felt it and said in her sleep, "Caesar, pig." She turned over and continued to sleep, snorting slightly. "Who looks like a pig?" The black dragon smiled and tucked in the corners of the quilt. He sat beside her and looked at her face silently. Luna was still the same as when she was young. As a long-lived species, it was difficult for a short time to leave a mark on her face. The little fellow who looked like a child would soon become a mother. The black dragon sat quietly and heard another voice from Luna's body. It had developed self-consciousness and perceived the existence of the black dragon beside its mother. It tried to release a cautious, timid, and intimate emotion, carefully probing the black dragon's reaction. Caesar did not respond. He was thinking about what his and Luna's child was. A true dragon would not have self-consciousness in its mother's body, nor would a fairy. Even no creature in Iradia known to him would have such a situation. Dragon? Fairy? Fairy dragon? Dragon fairy? But it was not important. Caesar did not have any requirements for the child, as long as it was normal and healthy. The black dragon's achievements over the years would allow them to live a stable life in Iradia. Caesar stroked Luna's loose hair. He probably did not have a chance to say goodbye to the little fellow before he left. The little fellow had been very sleepy recently, and her mood had been fluctuating. Caesar could understand her, and it did not want to wake her up. Hogg appeared outside the door, lowered his head, and whispered, "Your Majesty, the golden dragon Stannis has sent another message, inviting you to the kingdom of EBS." "Yes, I know," Caesar said. The black dragon stood up straight and slowly left. The moment he passed through the oak and vine door, the whole room rippled. The room looked warm and unguarded, but it was full of crisscrossing magic marks and invisible fatal traps. These marks and traps could even hurt the ancient red dragon Kadozi during testing. Only death awaited those who trespassed. "I agree to the plan to conquer Vilost. Let the departments start preparing. You will be in charge of everything else as before," Caesar said as he stood outside the door. "I'm leaving. You're not going to say goodbye to the queen? Let her sleep a little longer. I remember that Tia Balshk is a red dragon. Luna seems to like her. Summon her here for a while." Caesar walked towards the passage, his body slowly expanding. "Have you seen hell?" "Enicorn," Stannis said in a heavy tone. "This is it." The golden dragon slowly moved his body away from Enicorn's line of sight. The scene in front of Enicorn was revealed. Silver dragon Enicorn looked through the heavy rain and saw countless viper dragons writhing on the devastated land, burrowing into and out of the ground. Hell spiders swayed their large abdomens and laid eggs on the corpses of the dead. Snake scorpion servants screamed incessantly, using their sharp claws to kill every living creature. Some indescribable black shadows wandered around the edge of the battlefield, greedily sucking on the terrified souls. Further away, some huge creatures stood together and seemed to be talking about something. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and lightning shot a blinding white light over, illuminating the bodies of those creatures. Monet's spawn. Stannis tried his best to suppress the shock in his voice. "I've seen some of them. Crypt lords, nine-headed giant serpents. They've all come back to life. Don't keep staring, Enicorn. These spawn are also very strong. They will be discovered," Stannis reminded the young silver dragon. "Can we really defeat them?" Enicorn took a deep breath and said in an unconfident tone, "Our ancestors did it before. Of course, we could do it too." The golden dragon said solemnly, like a father teaching his young daughter. "The metal dragons are not fighting alone. His Majesty Bahamut has negotiated with the Dragon Queen. The tyrant Alex and her Pinochet dragons will also join this battle. But we still don't know how strong Monet is. He did it on purpose, Stannis said. The unknown is a power that can make you panic from the bottom of your heart. This panic will accumulate over time and eventually cause you to collapse. The dark clouds were very low. Night was coming. Monet's spawn would probably finish cleaning up and digesting the battlefield the day after tomorrow and launch an attack on their new target. This meant that they still had one day to make the final preparations. Time is too tight. The military forces of Butchie, Marha, and Io have already arrived. But we still have many allies on their way, including the Wolfheart clan, the Taya Elven Kingdom, and the Central Trading City-States. The Tyrant Alex and the Black King Tangerine you mentioned have not appeared. The Silver Dragon looked worried. The Pinochet dragons cannot be trusted. I doubt they will be able to come. They will, Stannis said with certainty. Quell Dorii is the common enemy of all dragons. I think Her Majesty Tiamat will not give up on the Pinochet dragons on this continent. As for the Black Emperor, if he wants that information, he will definitely come. And he is the main force against Monet. Chapter 4:27. He's almost here. The gold dragon brought Enegorn to an empty space some distance away from the army's base and cast a constant illumination spell to make it float in the air. He had to lure the other party here first to prevent the other party from landing directly in the army's base and causing uncontrollable chaos. Who is it? Enegorn asked. Caesar Tangerine. The gold dragon looked at the surroundings and confirmed that there would be no problem for the monster to land here. He just sent me a message saying that it's about 20 minutes away from the location I gave him. The Black Dragon Emperor is a supernatural creature after all, so he should be on time. By flying? The silver dragon raised her slender neck and said with a surprised tone, "Isn't he going to teleport here directly?" He said that a truly powerful dragon would not bother to use magic. The Black Dragon Emperor's message made Stannis relax a lot. He smiled and said, "The Red Dragon Emperor said the same thing before. We know the reason. Ignorant of magic." Enegorn nodded in agreement. But remember, this guy's psionic power is very strong. Even I was fooled last time. Stannis looked around and said, "Make some simple preparations and make it look like a welcoming ceremony. After all, the Black Dragon Emperor and his army will be the main force against Monet when the time comes. We have to treat him well." Enegorn used an evocation spell to construct a huge table. No, that guy has to be at least 50 meters tall. Stannis glanced and shook his head. Enegorn used an evocation spell to construct an exaggerated table and smashed it on the ground with a bang. Then he made a huge napkin, a huge wine glass, and a huge plate. He then took out a Snow Mountain beer from his dimensional pocket and filled the glass. He then made a few tulips and placed them on the table. This was the most appropriate welcome ceremony that the Silver Dragons could imagine. Unlike the Pinochet dragons, the Metal Dragons rarely maintained their gigantic forms after they reached adulthood, except for battle. They preferred to transform into intelligent humans and beautiful elves, and most of their targets were humanoid creatures. Most of the Metal Dragons did not know how to welcome the king of the Pinochet dragons, nor did they intend to study it. Einicorn only knew that the Pinochet dragons loved to show off their strength and ferocity, so they were keen on maintaining their giant form. Therefore, she thought for a while and decided to prepare a welcoming ceremony for the Black Dragon Emperor. So be it. A roar came from the other side of the sky. The rain had stopped, but the sky was covered with dark clouds. However, the two metal dragons knew that something was approaching quickly with wind and thunder. Faster than expected, Stannis said, tilting his head back. The clouds were as deep as the sea. The black dragon shuttled through the black clouds, letting out a shrill cry that tore through the air. He descended and dove towards the light source of the illumination spell. His tail seemed to be burning, dragging a flaming meteor behind him. The ground shook slightly, and fine stones bounced off. It seemed that the black dragon needed some time to arrive from the other side of the sky, but it only took an instant for him to descend. The Black Dragon Emperor crashed into the ground like a meteor and landed in front of Stannis with a loud bang. Dust and dirt flew up, and the cracks on the edge of the crater spread in all directions. Caesar's dark golden pupils were as eye-catching as fire in the dark night. Einicorn raised her neck and saw Caesar shaking off the dust as he walked out of the smoke. Although she already knew that the Black Dragon Emperor was 50 meters in size, she could not help but exclaim, "So big!" when she saw the largest irradiate true dragon with her own eyes. Hearing the sound, Caesar glanced down. Astonishment turned into horror. In an instant, the pair of dark golden pupils occupied Einicorn's entire field of vision. The center of its pupils was dark, but it emitted an incomprehensible brilliance. The golden cracks radiating from its pupils formed a complicated pattern, like a spider web that robbed the spirit and will of a living being. Plutonium. Plutonium. Einicorn was shocked. It's not an Acheron. Caesar knew what the silver dragon wanted to say. In fact, he had been told this by many people and dragons. That damned red dragon, Cardass, had been nagging him all day long. "It's the black dragon. It's the black dragon," Stannis said with certainty. But this is clearly... Einicorn still wanted to say something. Hespero. Stannis used a solemn tone to call her by her surname. His eyes were solemn as he signaled the silver dragon not to waste time on this question. Not only Caesar, but many things that happened to mutated dragons could not be explained with conventional knowledge. Even the gods could not see the truth of this, so it was meaningless for them to investigate. All right, Einicorn lowered her head. She wanted to say that these were clearly the pupils of an Acheron. Her family's ancestor was lucky enough to see the death omen of the abyss, Zeron, from afar, and did not die. That scene was eternally preserved in the inheritance of the dragon of Hespero, and the pupils of the death omen Zeron in the scene were exactly the same as Caesar's. No one knows who Caesar Tangerine's father is. Could it be? A bold idea popped up in Silver Dragon's mind, but he immediately shook his head. The Black Dragon Emperor also had a pair of younger siblings, the Dark Twin Stars, but those two little guys didn't show any peculiarities. It seemed that it was because of the mutated dragons. Caesar looked at the huge table and said, "It seems that the haze of war did not affect your good mood. The two of you even prepared a banquet." "No," Stannis explained. "Your Majesty Tangerine, this is a welcoming ceremony prepared for you." Einicorn bent her forelimbs slightly, bent her neck, and lowered her head. "Audrey Einicorn Hespero greets you, King of the Northlands, Caesar Tangerine. Thank you for lending a helping hand to the Metal Dragons and fighting Monet with us." "You changed your name?" Caesar asked. "I remember the last time we met. You said that your name was Lanner Einicorn. Is that right? The Dragon of 1,000 Laws." This guy actually remembers. Einicorn's teeth ached, and she could only return an awkward smile. "That is my human name, Your Majesty. Speaking of humans, I do not understand why you revealed your true forms before the war. This is war, and an overly large target will be easily grasped by the enemy. This kind of welcoming ceremony in your true form is completely wrong." Caesar stared at the huge table, chairs, and other utensils, and said, "I do not deny the strength of the metal dragons, but the various signs make me doubt your wisdom in war." Einicorn was a little lost, and her claws dug into the ground beneath her feet. The silver dragon was a true dragon who liked to maintain her human form the most. Today was the only time she had made an exception to use her true form in a non-combat state. It was all because the Black Dragon Emperor liked to use his large form to show off his power and majesty. She had changed her form to accommodate his temperament, and had even stupidly prepared a huge table, chairs, and utensils. However, things did not develop in the way she had expected, and the other party had even begun to doubt their intelligence. She glanced at Stannis, and found that the Gujin Long was still deep in thought, and was not moved at all. Einicorn had no choice but to do it herself, and put away the magic items with a dirty face. "You are right, we should use some disguises." The damn gold dragon came back to life, and Stannis used a transformation spell to quickly disguise himself as a bare-chested strong man with a huge sword on his back. The silver dragon took a deep breath and after she had calmed down, she transformed into a half-elf girl in a long dress and a white light. This was the appearance she had always shown to others. Before the war, it was necessary to disguise one's self as a small form, but it was not necessary to disguise one's self as a human. Caesar thought for a while and used the second form that he had come up with recently. Psionic power and magic were ultimately different, and his body began to distort. This is a demon? Unicorn looked at the terrifying humanoid creature covered in black scales, with a huge tail and a back full of horns and barbs, and asked in an uncertain tone, "There is no such demon in this world." Caesar lowered his head and stared at his sharp claws that retained the characteristics of dragons. He clenched his claws and immediately felt the feedback of strength. This form increased the limit of the disguise state to another level, and it felt pretty good. Chapter 428. There is indeed no such demon in this world, but it was not appropriate to call this form a dragonborn. Stannis felt that it was more appropriate to describe the Black Dragon Emperor's disguise as a dragonborn demon. His face was covered by a mask made of keratin, and 4 sharp bone spurs grew from his neck to the top of his head. The elbows protruded like sharp blades and were slightly bent to the same level as the claws. The wings on his back were twisted into huge bone horns that could be moved. The texture of the bones was like red copper that had been repeatedly calcined by fire. This body was covered in black scales, but the huge heart in the chest was emitting a crack-like red light, exuding the awe-inspiring majesty of an emperor, causing people to involuntarily look up at it. "I think the Infernal Lord, Asriers, will definitely like your current appearance." Stannis could only comment like this. "Does this body have an original form? Your Majesty Tangerine? Have you really seen such a creature before?" Enagorn asked. The intertwined red and dark disguise made her shudder. Among the metal dragons, the silver dragon's premonition was always accurate. The original form of this body was something very terrifying. At least Iradia did not, nor did the astral plane. Caesar shrugged and frankly said, "It came from another part of my memory, just like the elegy card." Enagorn seemed to understand a little and was relieved. Previously, the situation was urgent, so I could only briefly describe the current crisis facing the continent. Now that we have time, I can explain the situation to you in detail, Emperor Tangerine. Stannis used the evocation spell to create a new table and chair, invited Caesar to take a seat, and then sat down himself. He spread out the map on the table and drew a red circle at a certain location. "This is the map of this area. The red circle marks our current location, and Monet's army of destruction has already occupied the entire EBS kingdom." "Yes," Caesar nodded. Although EBS kingdom is a small country in the north, because of the perennial conflict with the centaurs in the southern plains, the country has a large number of knights and war personnel. They have all the necessary elements of a war machine, including border fortresses, magic cannons, garrison troops, and spellcasting groups. Before Monet's invasion, EBS kingdom was stable, and there were no natural disasters, civil strife, curses, or other crises. But it was such a country that went from prosperity to destruction in 2 weeks. I wonder if the centaurs listened and went to the north in the end. Caesar's train of thought jumped. The royal family of EBS has never asked for help from other countries. We do not know if they have organized any resistance or how strong they are. The metal dragons have always been trying to find more information, but the work was very slow. Stannis said, "How could there be no survivors in a country with such a large population? Wouldn't the citizens of the kingdom of EBS want to escape?" Caesar shook his head. "Also, after Monet recovered, didn't Bahamut pay attention to that area? How can you not have any information? This is what I am about." Stannis did not care that Caesar called the god by his name. He continued in a heavy tone. "Monet is the Monet from the Lost Era. After being implanted with the Godfire, he fought the Dragon God and Dragon Queen with the help of Quel'Dorii. He is not only a weapon of war, but also an intelligent creature. In a sense, he even has the foundation to become a god. He has the ability to form a fog to block the detection of spells and the spying of the gods. Not only that, according to my personal guess, after the attack, he even sealed off the entire EBS kingdom. Like a python, he first swallowed his prey whole, and then slowly killed and digested it. It is not that the people of EBS kingdom did not want to escape, but they could not escape at all. Even the information they sent out was eaten. Understood. Caesar said, when will they start to move again? The morning after tomorrow. In such a hurry? Time is tight. Caesar, who was in human form, unconsciously wagged his tail. We are afraid that it will be even earlier. Monet was killed for 7,000 years. When he resurrected, he found that he could no longer find his former master and creator. Quel'Dorii had disappeared without a trace. These changes will only make him hate the world even more, and he can't wait to destroy everything. Stannis looked at Caesar's fierce human form and said, I think, if you were sealed in the abyss of solitude for 7,000 years, the first thing you would do when you got out would be to destroy the world. If he didn't need to transform his flesh and blood into more servant puppets, it would be even faster. After all, when Yukir appeared, he was already creating minions. Then what is your next plan? Caesar said, stay here. Stannis stared at the map. We are waiting for reinforcements. We just received news that the army of the trading city-states in the central region has arrived at Mount Bartholomew. They will not join us, but attack Monet from behind. In addition, the chiefs of the Wolfheart clan and the Elven Forest Queen are also on their way. They are expected to arrive tomorrow evening. The trading city-states are also involved in this matter. Caesar was a little surprised. Not only the trading city-states, but the other countries in the river also gave us economic support. Originally, the empire where the sun never sets would also come to deal with Monet, but their Dawn army went to the abyss to deal with the spatial rift. Because of something called the Industrial Revolution, there were several rebellions in the country that needed to be suppressed. The situation is quite bad, so they can't participate in this operation. Stannis explained, it sounds like half of Eladia is on the move. Caesar shrugged. Although the dragons were no longer the dominant force on this continent, when the platinum dragon god Bahamut asked, not many people could refuse the kind king of the North Wind. Forgive me for being presumptuous, your majesty Tangerine. The half-elf who had been silent after turning into her human form suddenly spoke. Until now, I have not seen the army of the Blackwing Empire. Are you planning to fight alone? The army of the Empire has already set off. Caesar slowly finished the wine in his cup. In terms of enjoying life, humanoid creatures had more tricks up their sleeves. But they won't appear here. I envy your courage. You don't even know Monet's ability and servants, yet you dare to suppress all your forces in a cramped corner. Aren't you afraid of being wiped out by a forbidden spell? Above our heads, there are invisible magic imprints and mage eyes everywhere. Unicorn took a deep breath. This was the second time the Black Dragon mocked their operation. She suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart. Monet is not a god. Just the metal dragons alone, there are more than 50 adult dragons gathered in the camp. Together with the spellcasters from Butchie, Malha, and Io, we have the ability to counter any spells. Caesar turned his head and glanced at her, but did not say anything. The reason why we chose to gather here is because this is the only way north of the EBS kingdom, Stannis explained. We can't determine whether Monet's next target is Butchie, Malha, or Io, so we can only gather the army to intercept him in advance. Chapter 429. In the latter half of the night, the dense clouds finally dispersed a little, revealing the stars and moon that had been waiting for a long time. Even if the illumination spell was removed, the light from the sky could still be seen. Caesar left the landing site under the lead of the metallic dragon and headed towards the army camp. The full name of the camp was probably Io, Butchie, Malha, and the metallic dragon multi-race army camp. Such a camp was no different from the mixed cities in the Blackwing Empire. So when Caesar walked into the camp, his terrifying appearance did not cause too much of a commotion. The army needed to conserve energy in the middle of the night. Other than the scouts on the sentry towers and the patrolling troops who were still keeping an eye on the area of responsibility, there were few people moving around in the camp. However, he still attracted some curious gazes. After all, Caesar's appearance was completely different from the metallic dragon's traditional harmless disguise, and the people happened to recognize the highly recognizable strongman. Ancient Dragon Stannis was one of the core leaders of this military operation. Many people wanted to see who could make the noble ancient dragon lead the way. Although it was silly and cliché, it was human nature to be curious and seek knowledge. Your Majesty Tangerine, I hope that you can patrol the camp under the lead of Enicorn tomorrow. Stannis requested. You only need to patrol a few core camps. Why? This is not my army. They're commanded by the human kingdom's commander. Because of confidence, Stannis said. A truly powerful person, even if he does not use his own strength, will constantly influence others. When people know that Iradia's Black Dragon King has appeared on the battlefield and is standing on their side, their confidence that has been constantly eroded by the fear of the unknown will be greatly boosted by the arrival of a powerful support. Not only the Black Dragon Emperor, when the Elven Queen, the Wolfheart Chieftain, and even the Tyrant Alex come, we will also ask them to do the same. In the past, we were extremely jealous of the Penishade dragons, but in front of Monet, we are allies on the same front. Enicorn added, we will maintain the greatest restraint, and I believe the Penishade dragons will do the same. All right, Caesar nodded and immediately understood the meaning behind the two dragons' words. He choked on his laughter and glanced at the half-elf. Don't worry, if Alex doesn't take the initiative to provoke me, I won't find trouble with her. Among the undulating gray tents, a building wrapped in bronze stood out. It was like a fortress, rooted in the center of the joint army camp, hinting at the importance of this bronze fortress. It could be seen that this was a temporary building cast by magic. Even in the middle of the night, there was still a bright bonfire burning inside. The Iradia humans called it the Lord's Fortress. Caesar guessed that its significance should be similar to that of an army's battle command. After knowing that you had arrived, I immediately contacted the camp. Stannis said, the Blackwing Empire's participation in the war is of great significance. The kings, lords, and commanders of various countries, powerful spellcasters, as well as some heroes, are all waiting for your arrival inside. The guards stepped aside, and Enicorn gently opened the bronze door. The temporary command fortress was naturally not luxurious. It was spacious and empty inside, with only a huge round table and neatly arranged bronze chairs. There were 2 maps of the surrounding area of different proportions hanging on the wall. Other than that, there was nothing else. Enicorn turned sideways. The Black Dragon Emperor, Caesar Tangerine, stepped in. He appeared in his second form. His red and dark body was even more dazzling than the constant illumination spell in the fortress. His bone spurs, sharp claws, and horns perfectly retained the characteristics of a dragon, casting a fierce shadow against the backdrop of the bonfire. Even though he had restrained his draconic aura, his aura was still breathtaking, as if he was a dragon king descending upon the world. Attending a meeting of the humans in such a form was something that the people waiting for had not expected. However, everyone present were basically nobles, and, as nobles, being calm in the face of unexpected events was the most basic quality. These kings and lords were very good at controlling their emotions. Shock and panic only appeared for a moment, and they did not make any disrespectful moves. One of the people present stood up and bowed courteously. Welcome, King of the North, Your Majesty Tangerine. Thank you for being willing to generously extend a helping hand. I am extremely honored and extremely grateful. The Blackwing Empire's participation in the war has increased our confidence. The Kingdom of Io will never forget your friendship. This guy, was he really the king of country? Worthy of the crown on his head? Although everyone was prepared to express their welcome and gratitude, the way they worded it was already considered as fawning. Looking at the situation, it felt as if Nielsen's own daughter had been played by the Black Dragon Emperor. He would have jumped up in joy and sent 2 more over. Sitting beside the King of Io, Grand Duke Marha rolled his eyes. Stannis once again fell into deep thought. The other commanders and lords who also wore the Io eagle emblem could not help but lower their heads. Even Enigorn could not help but raise his eyebrows at the king of Io's shamelessness. Of course, Nielsen Charlie's performance was not without reason. The motivation was Io and the Blackwing Empire had a close trade relationship. At the same time, as the kingdom of Aisala that was heavily supported by the Blackwing Empire, Io had received assistance from the Northern Empire in many ways unknown to others. Others in other countries did not know about these things, but as the king, Nielsen was very clear about it. To put it simply, the kingdom of Io and the Blackwing Empire had a direct interest relationship. The stability of this relationship depended on the attitude of the Black Dragon Emperor. If fawning could allow the kingdom of Io to receive more support and benefits from the empire, then Nielsen would fawn over the Black Dragon Emperor until the climax. The awkward atmosphere could only be broken by Caesar. He nodded towards Nielsen's direction. This guy had sent several letters in the name of the king to the imperial court to request an audience with the Black Dragon Emperor. However, he had been rejected by Caesar, so the two sides had never met. Therefore, Nielsen had to seize this opportunity to do his best. After that, the other countries also stood up to express their goodwill. The other countries were not as secretive as the Ajo kingdom. However, most of the northern kingdoms had trade relations with the Blackwing Empire. Although these countries had conflict with each other over territory, they did not dare to offend the enormous Blackwing Empire. Therefore, they had always maintained good relations with the Blackwing Empire. Caesar also nodded toward them one by one. He was straightforward and meticulous, maintaining a friendly attitude. Originally, in the Blackwing Empire's strategy of befriending those far away and attacking those near, these countries were the imaginary enemies of the empire. They were the next targets to be conquered. However, the empire that never sets the sun had sensed the threat in advance and could not wait to jump out first. Therefore, the Blackwing Empire could only put on a friendly face and change their strategy to rope in these little brothers to play with the empire that never sets the sun. After greeting each and every one of them, Enigorn slowly took over the leading role. The silver dragon was born for social occasions. With a flash of silver in her eyes, hot milk, cakes, desserts, and fruit salad appeared on the large round copper table. Her words were like a comforting spring breeze. "Everyone, please take a seat. Stannis and I are deeply sorry for disturbing the good dreams of the kings. However, the situation cannot be delayed. I must immediately announce the latest news that I have received." Chapter 430. In the Lord's Fortress of the Joint Base, Enigorn was giving a speech. The Silver Dragon's talent for communication was self-taught, so it was best for her to guide the proceedings of the meeting. "We are still investigating Monet's specific information, but we have already figured out his battle system. He has a large army, which is directly controlled by his spawns. The number of spawns is unknown, but we know that there are 5 of them. I will now introduce them to everyone. The spawn that was killed by the Blackwing King and the Gilded Wildfire some time ago, the giant snake Monet Hydra." As she spoke, she waved her hand and scattered a silver light, showing the ferocious projection of the giant snake to everyone. I believe everyone has heard that this giant snake that held Yukrahir in its mouth is the strongest monster among the known spawns. It has now appeared again. The information about Monet Hydra can be found in the documents that the Metal Dragon gave everyone. Please be careful of its ability to control alternate dimensions, so I will not go into details. The main thing I want to tell everyone is its position in Monet's army. According to the latest investigation, the undead Viper Dragons are all under its command. This is also the strongest fighting force in Monet's army. This means that when these Viper Dragons appear, that area has already become Monet's main attack area. Enigorn looked into Caesar's eyes. These Viper Dragons are very terrifying monsters. Only the strongest army can stop them. Your Majesty Caesar, only your Blackwing clan can do it. When necessary, the Metal Dragon clan will provide assistance." Caesar thought for a moment and was unexpectedly frank. "All right," he said. Stannis did not expect the Black Dragon Emperor to agree so quickly. It seemed that he was very concerned about the blood curse. The gold dragon took out a small box from his dimensional pocket. The box seemed to have some history. It was wrapped in a light green lizard, the brass lock was rusty, and the seal had the emblem of the platinum dragon god. He handed the box to Caesar. This is the detailed information about the viper dragons. Many of you have seen our translation in the common language, but this is the original written in the Draconic language. It has His Majesty Bahamut's annotations and reminders. Is there a need? Caesar opened the box and flipped through the stack of yellow, brittle, and abnormally tough papers. He took a few glances. After flipping to the end, he understood why Stannis was so serious. Not only did it describe the Viper Dragon's personality, growth cycle, reproduction efficiency, and various weaknesses, but in the last few pages with special annotations, it also recorded the breeding methods for ordinary Viper dragons and the Quell Dorii technology to create undead Viper dragons. Although many of these materials were already extremely rare in Eladia, this was the Metal Dragon's way of thanking the Blackwing clan for their willingness to take on this difficult mission. That was why, even though the Metal Dragons also had some unbearable problems, the humans were still passionate about staying together with them. At the very least, they wouldn't make you feel like you were on the losing end when dealing with them. Enegorn had been waiting for Kaiser to finish reading the report. The others were also waiting in silence. No one was dissatisfied. The Blackwing Empire and the Metallic Dragons had already expressed that they would take the lion's share of the battle. What else could they be dissatisfied about? When Caesar put the paper back into the box and looked up, Enegorn continued. Second, Manabler, leader of the snake-scorpion beasts. A projection appeared on the round table. It had bat wings on its back, for hooves on its hands and feet. Its entire body was burning with green flames. It looks like a terrifying abyssal demon, but in fact, it's just a monster that Monet created based on a certain lord of the abyss. Its actual combat power isn't as strong as it looks. The snake-scorpion beasts that it rules are the vanguard of Monet's army, which is what people often call the cannon fodder army. Third, Manabler and Ubalak. Enegorn stared at the giant beetle licking its feet and frowned. Until now, we still do not understand how the Netherlings of the First Era could be related to the Quell Dorii of the Lost Era. However, they have indeed reappeared in the light of day and have been corrupted into Manabler's claws. The Netherlings are the spellcasters of Manabler's army. Because they can lay eggs and reproduce in the corpses of the dead, their numbers will only increase. When the war truly begins, the Metal Dragons will send helpers to all the armies to provide spell support to resist the spider magic of the Netherlings. No one said a word. These three were monsters that had been active in Bramble Mountain before Manabler's revival. The kings and commanders of the various countries had already known about them from their own intelligence channels. More importantly, there was more information. Fourth, Enegorn found a seat and sat down. During this period, we have encountered several small-scale probing attacks. This should be the leader of those bloodbaths. She pointed at a blurry, dragon-like creature on a round table and said, "This creature was observed by Lord Stannis when he visited Bramble Mountain. It has only appeared once. Currently, we have not obtained its name or the strength of its abilities. However, we can be sure that the bloodbaths it leads are Manabler scouts. When you return, please be vigilant of these small creatures in the night." The fifth, Enegorn explained. Not only did the fifth bloodbath not have a name, it did not even have an image. All the members of the round table could see was a blurry shadow. The Metal Dragons were relying purely on the clues in Manabler's army to determine the possibility of its existence. How did Manabler create these bloodbaths? Nielsen asked. I don't know. Enegorn shook her head. We still can't find out where Manabler is, so we have no idea what he is doing and how he creates these bloodbaths. This was the biggest problem that the Metal Dragons were currently facing. It also brought them a great sense of defeat. Of course you can't find it. A cold voice came from the other end of the hall. The woman pushed open the bronze door. She seemed to be walking in, but her feet did not touch the ground. She was wearing a tight-fitting black gauze dress, revealing her seductive figure. She wore a pair of pattern-lace gloves between her index and middle fingers, extending from the back of her hand to her upper arm. Her waist was tied with a knot, outlining her graceful curves. She was dressed like a noble madam, but her face was that of a beautiful young girl. The real difference was that she was different from the typical beautiful girl. It wasn't because of her figure or appearance, but rather her aura. She seemed to have arrived on a bolt of lightning, and her beauty carried the sternness of a monarch. The nine-headed serpent you're talking about originated from Monabler's ability to control space. So, it is stronger. Monet is able to create a half-bit wall for himself to hide in, and he can also hide in any different space that is connected to Eridia, unless the gods personally descend to the lower realm to search for him. You can only lie on the ground like a dog and sniff inch by inch to find him. The woman's words attracted everyone's attention. Enigorn's smile became more dangerous. For the first time, the silver dragon said coldly with an unfriendly attitude, "You are very rude." Just like the red dragon and the gold dragon were natural enemies, the silver dragon also had its natural enemies among the Pinochet dragons. Well, now is the time. Maybe, but the Pinochet dragons are like this. I really don't like pretentious guys like you. The woman sat down on the empty seat next to Caesar without hesitation. She raised her glass to him and said, "Don't you think so, King Tangerine?" Chapter 431. Alex. Caesar's voice was emotionless. "I thought you had already escaped from Iradia. How could that be?" The black dragon did not follow her words, and Alex was not angry. The milk in her cup had turned into hard liquor, and she finished it in one gulp. "I'm just sleeping in a non-sealed state. Ever since the last time, you made me thirst for power even more fervently." She turned her head and looked at the human leaders who were sitting upright. She revealed an impressive smile. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Sylvie Alex Auguste, the leader of the Pinochet Dragons, Tyrant Alex. Don't think that beautiful women would be unreservedly sought after everywhere, at least not here." The scene fell into a strange silence. It was true that the Pinochet dragons were powerful reinforcements. Everyone present knew that. However, their cruel and tyrannical nature and their long history of opposing humans and metal dragons made it difficult for the dragons present to squeeze out a smile at the Pinochet Dragon King. "Your Excellency Alex," Einkorn said coldly, "if you continue to treat this war with such an attitude, please forgive us for not being able to cooperate with you. You and your Pinochet dragon army can find an opportunity to join the battlefield. Please close the door for us before you leave." Einkorn's emotions came very suddenly, and his words were very harsh. However, even the more calm and rational Golden Dragon did not stop him. It seemed that both sides had been holding grudges for a long time. This was the result of them restraining themselves to the greatest extent. "You really make me sad. Don't you all want to know more about Monet?" Alex imitated the Dragon Queen's signature tone. "The last time I saw him was 7,000 years ago." Everyone suddenly realized that Alex was not the original giant dragon of Iradia. She had a shocking background. She was the child of a true ancestor of the blue dragons, Crosto Auguste. She was a direct descendant of the mother of evil dragons, Tiamat. She was the ancestor of the true dragons with the highest bloodline. After being brought to Iradia by Tiamat, this blue dragon spent most of her time in a self-sealing state where her growth was stagnant in order to prevent her power from breaking through the material barrier. She would only awaken at critical moments to help the Dragon Queen deal with some particularly troublesome problems in this plane. Thinking back, the last time Tiamat's true body descended to the mortal realm was 7,000 years ago. In other words, Alex had been in that era and witnessed the war between Quell Dorii and the Dragon God and Dragon Queen. Enigorn's gaze suddenly turned sharp. "Go on." "Suddenly, I don't feel like talking anymore. Since the metal dragons can't cooperate with us, I can only bring the Pinochet dragons and find a chance to join the battlefield." Alex leaned back and crossed her right leg over her left leg. She shook her calf gently and played with the wine glass in her hand. Enigorn looked straight into Alex's eyes across the table without saying a word. There were a total of 2 females in the Lord's fortress, and they had a silent conflict the moment they arrived. The others were not in a position to stop them, mainly because in front of these 2, commanders, heroes, and kings were nothing. Alex was a direct descendant of Tiamat, the mother of evil dragons, and unicorn's status was not low either. She was the chosen of the platinum dragon god Bahamut and the pearl of the Iradia metal dragons. The tense situation lasted for half a minute, and Alex did not say a word. She knew that these metal dragons would definitely beg her in the end, and this was her goal. The blue dragons had a strong desire for authority, and no matter what, they wanted to have enough authority to speak. And the process of fighting for authority had to start with the metal dragons admitting defeat. After another half a minute, the scene was dead silent. Seeing that the blue dragons were determined to do it, Stannis struggled for a while and opened his mouth. "I've waited long enough. Go on." These words did not come from Stannis. He wanted to admit defeat to the ancestral blue dragons. The voice came from beside Alex, the Emperor of the Black Dragon. Alex glanced sideways at Caesar. She remembered that she had something to say to this guy later, so she decided to give him face. Quel'Dorii decided to use the supreme god Io as a template to create a war weapon against the dragon god and dragon queen, Monet. Unfortunately, they have never seen god Io before. Relying on the name Nine-Faced Dragon God, they created a huge monster with 9 heads. It has the claws of the gold dragon, the scales of the red dragon, and the wings of the blue dragon. "Stupid," Inicorn commented. Inicorn commented that the god Io was the common ancestor of all dragons. Whenever someone tried to distort and tarnish the image of the god Io, all true dragons would be enraged. Nine-Faced Dragon God meant that god Io could change into any form, communicate peacefully with creatures of any camp, and was respected and worshipped by thousands of races. It definitely did not mean that it had 9 heads. It is quite stupid, but don't think of Monet as simple. Even without an army, with your current ability, even with the help of the Penishade dragons, it would be difficult to find its original body in a short time, Alex said. Alex continued, "It is not a reckless and ignorant beast. Quel'Dorii put all his efforts into creating it. It killed all the creatures in the EBS kingdom not only for revenge, but also to devour flesh and blood to create derivatives. Also, Stannis, you idiot, miscalculated the time. Monet only needs 3 days to hatch a derivative. In other words, it can already move again today." Stannis choked. He had once been beaten up by Alex on the dragon battlefield and had to flee with his tail between his legs. He did not have much confidence in front of this blue dragon. "Sounds like a nest," Caesar said. He thought of a game in another world. As long as gold, ore, and would report in, the base would spit out soldiers. You can think of it that way. Alex thought for a moment and understood what Caesar meant. A weapon of war and a weapon of war are not the same concepts. It is a nest and also a hatching pool. It can continuously create all kinds of aberrant creatures. Snake, scorpion, beasts, Nephilim, viper dragons, bloodbats. In a sense, it already has the power of a god. You said that it has regained its ability to move, but why is it still hiding in the EBS kingdom? Someone asked, "Do you think that the blood and bones provided by a kingdom is only enough to create one derivative?" Alex looked at the person who asked the question with an "I am very disappointed in you" look. "A second one," Stannis muttered. "Yes, it is accumulating more power," Alex said with a sneer. Alex sneered. "So don't even think about defending, idiots. You have to organize an attack before his second spawn hatches. Even if you can't find Monet's body, you have to at least force him to command the army and drag him out of his unconscious incubation state. Why should we believe you?" The person who asked the question just continued. "I didn't ask you to believe me. I just said this piece of information. You could determine whether it is true or not. The Penishade dragon is here to win the war, not to have a tea party with you. Evil dragons would only talk to people or dragons of equal status. They would never reveal their true intentions to the weak." After saying this, Alex focused on the cup in his hand and did not speak again. Chapter 432. I think we should give a try. Unexpectedly, the first to agree was the king of the north, who had the worst relationship with the Penishade dragons. Caesar was the first to speak before anyone else expressed their opinions. He knew that a strong voice was needed at this time, so as to prevent the situation from falling into an endless tug of war, wasting time, energy, and saliva. As for Alex's information, Caesar was skeptical. He knew what kind of person Tiamat was. Any creature related to the Dragon Queen had to be treated with caution, and Tiamat was a direct descendant of the Dragon Queen. I agreed to launch a probing attack. Nielsen immediately jumped out to express his loyalty. Caesar frowned. This guy's performance was too obvious. Now, anyone could see that AIO had a close relationship with the Empire. Some matters that needed to be dealt with through other people's hands were not easy to handle. This was also Nielsen's original intention. He wanted to take this opportunity to announce to the surrounding countries that Io had already gotten close to the Blackwing Empire. This would allow him to gain more authority in the AI Sala region in the future and even gain a dominant position in the surrounding situation. Alex has already explained the information and the pros and cons. Is there still a need for a vote? Stannis raised his thick and dense eyebrows and looked at the silver dragon. What do you say, Audrey? Enegorn was silent for half a minute, then stood up and nodded. Understood. She bowed slightly to the king and the commanders. Please gather the troops as soon as possible. We will discuss the time of attack later. The leaders had all left, leaving only Caesar and Alex in the huge bronze citadel. Caesar took out a bottle of midsummer from his psionic space and poured himself a cup. He carried the wine to the window of a compartment and looked at the night view. The camp was very quiet in the middle of the night. No one would have thought that there was an unknown number of troops gathered here. Only the continuous light balls and bonfires revealed a clue. Stannis was still talking to the humans outside. The gold dragons were cautious and meticulous dragons. They were synonymous with taking care of everything personally. These dragons with fins on the back of their necks would become especially serious and nervous every time something big happened. They would make arrangements in advance and repeat their instructions, afraid that things would be messed up by others. Such a personality was quite suitable to be a leader, which was why Caesar had no intention of competing with them for the right to speak when he arrived. He allowed the metal dragons to make the arrangements. Of course, the main reason was that he was lazy. Long time no see. Aren't you going to buy me a drink? Alex walked over, not caring about the black dragon's terrifying figure at all. If you weren't a chromatic dragon, Caesar said calmly, I think I would. You don't have to admit that you're a chromatic dragon, but at the very least, you've lived with a chromatic dragon before. There are quite a few chromatic dragons in the Blackwing Empire. I remember that idiot Cardozi is currently working for you, right? Why are you still prejudiced against the Penishade dragons? Alex asked. I have no prejudice against the Penishade dragons. The Blackwing Empire also welcomes the Penishade dragons. Caesar glanced at her. However, this does not include the dragons that serve Tiamat. Alex paused for a moment, and electric arcs shot up the walls of the bronze fortress like snakes, isolating this space. Do you think I want to? She said in a low voice. Her words seemed to be suppressing a ball of fire. I have the highest bloodline, far more outstanding than all the chromatic dragons. I should have been the conqueror of the astral world. If I could grow up according to normal curves, I would have long been on par with my father, the true ancestor of the blue dragons, Crosto Augustus. Billions of true dragons in the endless world would crawl under my wings. Even if it was a god, I would be able to fight against him. But now I can only stay in a small Iradia and mix with these muddle-headed inferior species all day long. Quell Doriai's ridiculous war weapons make me constantly on edge. I'm treated as a tool by my god, my ancestors, and I'm only awakened when necessary. If the physical world of Iradia is not abandoned, I'm afraid that I won't be able to become an ancient dragon and touch the realm of gods even after thousands of years. Do you think I want to? It sounds like you have a lot of grievances. Tiamat, that fellow, actually didn't notice your problem. Caesar smacked his lips, touched his chin, and said, Why? Are you telling me about your journey, so that I can help you remove the Dragon Queen's control? If Alex had answered yes, and if the matter did not affect Caesar's interests, he would not have minded helping the Blue Dragon. His relationship with Tiamat had already reached such a level. Although there was no way to cause any substantial harm to the Dragon Queen, it was still good to annoy that old fellow. Harming others was beneficial to oneself. However, Alex shook her head. That's not it. In order to deal with the mutated dragons, the Dragon Queen let me wake up for dozens of times longer than usual. This time is enough for me to deal with some other problems. I won't let other dragons interfere in breaking free from the shackles. I'm telling you this just to correct some of your views and gain your favor, she said calmly and frankly. I want to mate with you. Caesar did not hear her clearly. I know you're very picky, but I'm also embraced. Seeing that the black dragon did not speak, Alex continued to act. Her face was expressionless, as if she was talking about a clearly marked deal. I'll satisfy you, and you'll give me the dragon seed. Dragons and humans had very different ethics. In their view, mating was only for pleasure and reproduction, so most dragons had more than one partner in their lifetime. It was even normal for both sides to have many partners at the same time. Weak dragons basically did not have any requirements for their partners, and rational and powerful dragons were generally inclined to find stronger true dragons to mate with. However, it was rare, even among the Pinochet dragons, to send a mating request to the enemy camp like this. You've got guts. Caesar reacted and stared at her with a cold smile. You know very well what the relationship between us is. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you when the time comes? Contract, Alex said calmly. Alex said calmly and took out a divine contract with binding force. The witness was the mother of evil dragons, Tiamat. Before Alex revealed her dissatisfaction with the Dragon Queen, Tiamat was very happy to see this happen. Although the black dragon was a big problem she wanted to get rid of quickly, there was no doubt about the strength of this guy's body. Even Tiamat wanted to obtain the mutated black dragon's dragon seed. Whether from a dragon's perspective or a human's perspective, Alex was a rare female. Her powerful strength and noble bloodline made her the dream target of many Pinochet dragons, but Caesar was not one of them. Do you think I'll promise Tiamat a contract? Caesar sneered. Before Alex could say that he could make a promise to Bahamut, he said stiffly, besides, I'm not the same as the Pinochet dragons. I've emphasized this point many times. Don't try to force your ethics on me. I'm not that desperate to be picky. Alex looked at Caesar's departing figure and sniffed the air. As a male, his body should have been so hungry that he couldn't be picky. Was this guy a monster? How did he suppress his instincts? Chapter 433. Just a few hours before dawn, a large-scale operation began in the El Sala region. Before the attack plan was finalized, an unprecedented number of troops and weapons had already left their kingdoms and arrived at the front line, awaiting orders. Because the teleportation circle had been set up long ago, these troops arrived in unprecedented speed. In the morning of the same day, the cities, towns, and villages that had been cleared were suddenly filled with a large number of knights. The number of knights far exceeded the number that Caesar had seen in the bronze fortress. Those were only the personal guards of the king, lords, and commanders. This was the real army of the kingdom. Griffin camps also appeared everywhere. In order to form an aerial attack, besides the Griffin nest in Balin, which was the closest to the kingdom of Ebb, the allied army had opened up dozens of temporary nests for the Griffins to rest. The southern part of Waglon, where the bronze fortress was located, had been turned into a huge arsenal. Weapons, armors, arrows, and bullets were hidden in the forest, while food and clothing were piled up in the storage center. Magic was indeed the greatest thing in Iradia. It was the existence of spellcasters that ensured these operations were carried out quickly, steadily, and in an orderly manner. Of course, this was a probing attack. Of course, they would not put all their forces into the war. When the Taya Kingdom and the Wolfheart clan arrived, the Alliance sent a portion of their forces to the border of Abu, waiting for orders from the command center of the Bronze Citadel. Almost overnight, the area was filled with bunkers and tents. Everyone knew that a war was coming. South of Waglon, outside the Lord's fortress. Busy messengers constantly passed through the path in the distance, like a dying fish crashing into the Allied army's headquarters. Caesar shook his head. This has nothing to do with you. No matter what, the Blackwing Empire will not allow Monet to reach the north. The elven forest is safe. You should not have come. The army of the kingdom of Tyia has arrived. The elven queen smiled at him. You can't drive us back. Why are you disobeying? Caesar frowned. This is the decision of all the citizens of the kingdom of Tyia. A country must have its basic dignity to be regarded as a country. The kingdom of Tyia needs to announce the name of our country to Iradia. When the Black Dragon said this, Jessie was a little scared. After all, the trauma of the past had left a deep impression on her. She gathered her courage and explained, "You know that an army must be trained to grow. The Blackwing Empire cannot protect us forever. This operation is the best opportunity. With the Empire, the Metal Dragons, and the Penachet Dragons, we will not have to take as much risk as we think." You are right. Caesar understood the logic, but the great Black Dragon was still a little unhappy. The possessiveness and control of a male caused him to subconsciously treat Kasia and the elven forest as his own. When the other party did something that went against his opinion, even if it was reasonable and correct, the Black Dragon would still feel uncomfortable. Caesar did not say anything else. After saying this, he walked away. As he strolled alone, almost everyone was afraid of the terrifying-looking Black Dragon Emperor. People who saw him from afar would take a detour. Caesar rarely saw any living people. As the light grew brighter and brighter, he could see the thick clouds covering the sky through the messy treetops. It seemed that the weather would not be good for a while. After a while, he coincidentally bumped into the silver dragon waiting outside. It was not a coincidence, as Inagorn was looking for him. Since the introduction to Caesar the last time, Stannis had pushed all matters related to the Black Dragon Emperor to the Silver Dragon. The main reason was that he had lost his momentum at the Blackwing court, so the Gold Dragon was too embarrassed to face Caesar again. He was responsible for communicating with the Penachet dragon leader, Alex. His Majesty Tangerine. Inagorn stopped him and bowed slightly. Perhaps because of Alex's provocation, Silver Dragon's appearance today was rather radiant. Her white silk dress with black floral patterns clung tightly to her body, and only a thin layer of gauze covered her shoulders and back. She wore a pair of white high heels on her feet. Her face was soft, and her body was beautiful. During the war period, humans would never wear such clothes, regardless of whether it was a queen, princess, or others. However, she was a dragon, and dragons would definitely use their original form of fight. After careful discussion, we have rejected the idea of a night attack. Against monsters with night vision, a night attack would only cause more trouble for the human army. We have finally decided to launch a probing attack at noon tomorrow. As she spoke, she raised her bright eyes and looked at Caesar. His Majesty Tangerine, please forgive me for asking again. Can your army really enter the battlefield at any time? My apologies. From the information we have gathered, we have not found any traces of the Blackwing Empire's army in the El Sala region. Can't you feel it? Caesar pointed at his feet. They are here. Burrows. Inagorn came to a realization. He recalled the Blackwing Empire's functional army that did not have a strong sense of presence. Their abilities were very similar to the Hell Spiders. They could dig underground tunnels quickly, and they could also build complex and spectacular underground palaces. She immediately sank her perception into the ground, and her beautiful face gradually turned red. Unknowingly, there was already more than one underground tunnel under their feet. In the distance, in an unexplored underground blind spot, tens of thousands of heartbeat signals were thumping. Some of them are still in Io Nation, Caesar said. Other than the Elven Forest that they had complete trust in, the other countries that had received the support of the Blackwing Empire were required by the Empire to set up military bases at strategic locations in their countries. On the other side of the Great Bilton Canyon in the Ajo Eagle Kingdom was the Blackwing Empire's military base in the Ajo Sala region. Io Nation had opened up a magic seal and established a two-way teleportation circle with the Blackwing Empire. The army moved through the teleportation circle. Even now, this military base had not been exposed to the outside world. All right, I understand. Inagor nodded. We will launch a probing attack at the border of the EBS kingdom at noon tomorrow. If the Viper Dragon appears, we will need the Blackwing Empire to defend against it. I hope your army can arrive at the right time. Tomorrow will not be a good day, Caesar said as he looked at the thick clouds in the sky. If there was a storm, his army would be affected. Don't worry. Changing the weather is not difficult for the metallic dragons. Inagorn smiled and looked behind Caesar. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Okay. Caesar nodded and followed the silver dragon's gaze. He saw Garcia standing there timidly. He was not too far away and did not speak. It seemed that he had followed him all the way. Chapter 434. Just as Inagorn had said, after the dawn of the second day, there were some rapid and unexpected developments in the weather. The thick clouds were gradually dispelled, and by 9 o'clock in the morning, the sky was completely clear. There were no more clouds in the blue dome of the sky, and only the blazing sun could be seen. At 10 o'clock, the Alliance's army had lunch at the same time, and after that, they began to inspect the weapons and equipment that they had repeatedly checked. The leaders studied the terrain of the Kingdom of EBS border spell model for the last time, and each of the vanguard troops arrived at their predetermined positions to determine their targets. The border of the Kingdom of EBS was almost entirely covered with hedges and thorns, and within the borders, there were patches of farmland and tall mounds. These mounds were densely covered with shrubs and small trees. The stubbornness of the Kingdom of EBS had caused them to have a bad relationship with the other Kingdom of EBS. From the beginning of the kingdom's establishment until now, there had been constant conflicts, and these countryside were natural fortresses between the invaders and the protectors. Because they had not yet set foot in the north, Monet's monsters did not destroy these things. The countryside was dotted with wooden and brick farmhouses with thatched roofs or red tile roofs. From time to time, there would be a small town that looked like a small castle. During times of war, these would become the base of the Kingdom of EBS army and the sturdy rock that resisted the invaders. But now they belonged to Monet. However, according to the Bronze Fortress, Monet was most likely still in an unconscious state of incubation. Even if the leaders of his minions detected an attack from the outside, they would not allow the monsters to use these defensive strongholds. This was undoubtedly good news for the Alliance. At 11 o'clock, the Kingdom of EBS suddenly became quiet. The originally noisy and unbridled soldiers all fell silent. They looked at each other and began to communicate with their eyes. They chewed tobacco leaves in their mouths and sharpened their swords over and over again. Not only the sound of humans, but even the sound of war horses and griffins could not be heard. The mounts quietly chewed on their food, occasionally shaking their front hooves and sharp claws. The Bronze Fortress released the latest news. The magicians I had observed traces of snake-scorpion beasts in the area ahead. It seemed like the leaders of Monet had discovered them. However, there were no new orders, indicating that the attack would continue. At 11:45, the human kingdoms of Io, Butchie, and Malha, the metallic dragons and the Penishade dragons, the elven kingdom of Taya, and the Wolfheart clan all closed their eyes at the same time and silently prayed to their gods for their last encouragement and protection. Most of the non-believers and shallow believers also tried to join in the prayer. 15 minutes later, the soldiers in the vanguard heard the roars of the giant dragons. The roars were getting louder and louder. Then, waves of encouraging dragon might came from above their heads. More than 30 pure-blooded giant dragons of different colors flew across the sky above the various regions. The metal dragons took the lead and were the first to charge into the borders of the EBS kingdom. Behind them were numerous vassals and dragonkin. The knights rode their griffins into the sky, and the elves mounted their giant eagles. The foxes and wolfmen rode their tiger-headed vultures to keep up with the formation. The war had begun. The key to the success or failure of the aerial forces was speed and powerful ground attacks. However, most of the knights were caught in a predicament right from the start. The response of Monet's army was very fast. The Naira spiders launched attacks aimlessly at the densely packed aerial forces, turning the sky into a net of firepower that was intertwined with glowing Naira magic and tenacious spiderwebs. Just as Garcia was about to launch an attack, her giant eagle companion was hit. For spiderwebs were thrown from all directions. They did not cause much damage, but the giant eagle, Cunil, lost its ability to fly. They had no choice but to fall vertically. The magic and venom flew past them. The queen cast a magic shield, but the corrosive venom still hit Cunil's body. She could feel the giant eagle struggling in pain. The whistling of the wind entered her ears. When she was close to the ground, she used slow to reduce the impact of the landing as much as possible. Then, she landed on the ground and cut off the head of the snake-scorpion beast that pounced on her. "Retreat," she said to the giant eagle. Even though Cunil was her close companion, she needed to give precise and swift orders in battle. Meaningless and artificial emotions would only get in the way of others and get oneself killed. Cunil was not in any danger. He landed in the human formation. The surroundings had already been plowed by the human cavalry. Fully armored soldiers were constantly coming up from behind. In the battlefield further ahead, the metal dragon's proud magic ability was displayed. Below them was a terrifying elemental purgatory. There were bone-chilling icicles and roaring pillars of fire everywhere. After a few steps, the queen's personal guards came back and pulled her onto the back of another giant eagle. The dangerous strategic goal of the Taya Elven Kingdom was to seize Fort Cowoso. It was one of the military fortresses at the border of the kingdom of EBS. If they succeeded, they could set up camp here and rebuild the defense line with the other fortresses. Butchi, Io, and Malha did not want to fight within their own borders, as it would bring disaster to their citizens. Fighting within the borders of the Ibu kingdom, which had already fallen, would not only not affect their territory, but would also increase the buffer zone. This was undoubtedly the best choice, and seizing the fortress was also the final goal of this probing attack. When the fort fell, Garcia had just arrived. She saw the elven rangers holding their dual blades and silently waiting. Stepping on the bloody stairs, she saw that the moss-covered central tower was empty. There were no prisoners. There were only some mindless low-level snake-scorpion beasts. "We quickly seized Fort Cowoso," said the adjutant. The battle was unexpectedly easy. Other than Fort Cowoso, Fort Kragos, Fort Clays, Fort Declan, Fort Mykid, and Fort Lafatsi were quickly seized by other forces. The first battle with Monet had ended. The whole process only took an hour. The Penishade Dragon Army and the main force of the battle, the Blackwing Empire, did not even show up. The enemy's resistance was weaker than expected. The only ones who really fought with the alliance were the snake-scorpion beasts. There were no signs of viper dragons or other monsters on the battlefield or in the fortresses. Monet's minions were also nowhere to be seen. When the Naira spiders realized that they could not resist, they quickly retreated into the ground. It was obvious that Monet's leaders also thought of this battle as a probing attack, and then gave the border fortresses to them casually. After the end of the war, there seemed to always be a kind of restless silence. Many of the slower troops did not even come into contact with Monet. The people were still unable to wake up from the rapid march and the ever-changing battlefield. They threw themselves into even busier work, counting the casualties, reorganizing the troops, and most importantly, rebuilding the defense line, waiting for the Allied Army's main forces and supply line to enter the battlefield of Ebro. Chapter 435. The first battle had ended. Now, Karanu Burning Mane of the Wolfheart Council and his 3,000 Foxwolf warriors had penetrated deep into the enemy's territory. He had temporarily lost contact with the Bronze Fortress. These Foxwolf warriors were tasked with the most important mission after the battle. They had to enter an unknown region and set up small strongholds in Aoun, Tila River, and Bailey. These 3 regions were all within a radius of 100 miles. They were close to 3 small villages and guarded the only way to the northern border of the EBS kingdom. The mages, I told them that the enemy had retreated and they had to occupy this place to monitor the movements of Monet's main forces. It was now 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Even in the no man's land, it was not easy to find and occupy a target area in a strange land. More importantly, it was risky. Now that they were in the enemy's land, they had to be careful of traps, danger zones, and monsters that hadn't left yet. No one from the Foxwolf clan had ever been to the El Sala area, so the difficulty of this mission was self-evident. However, this was a joint decision of the Bronze Fortress. For other races, the risk of this mission was extraordinarily high. The best choice was to let the quick-witted Foxwolf clan try it out. In the end, in order to ensure safety, Burning Mane Chief Karanu decided to bring his elite clansmen personally. He also had his own ideas. As a force supported by the Blackwing Empire, the Wolfheart Council was completely different from the Io Kingdom. The Foxwolf clan was a race that believed in the law of the jungle. They would not flatter the Io King like Nelson. They would fight for everything with their strength and strive to prove themselves in order to gain the favor of the Empire. So until now, although they knew that the Black Dragon Emperor was behind them, the 2 leaders sent by the Wolfheart Council, Hernu and Karanu, had not talked to the King of the North. If Caesar did not take the initiative to talk to them, there would be no communication between the 2 sides until the end of this war. Almost all the Foxwolf clansmen stubbornly believed that the Elven Forest had been established with the support of the Blackwing Empire. As long as the Foxwolf clan showed their loyalty and strength, the Blackwing Empire would spare no effort to help them. Thus, Karana took on the most risky mission at the beginning of the war and swore to complete it. He wanted to show the Black Dragon Emperor that the Foxwolf clan had more potential than the elves. As for Io country, Fox and Wolf did not care about those humans at all. What Eagle King Nielsen did was a disgrace to Fox and Wolf. As they moved towards the heart of the EBS kingdom, silence followed them like a shadow. The blazing sun above their heads was chilling to the bone. Karana was very familiar with this creepy feeling. Most enemies who were attacked by wolves in the middle of the night would suffer this kind of continuous torment, but now it seemed that it was their turn. Kalanu was aware that someone was spying on them, but they had no choice but to move on. The weather began to deteriorate. When the metal dragon's spell dissipated, the clouds began to gather again, like a dense giant net. The wind was getting stronger, and the thick fog that was difficult to appear at this time of the year was coming from all directions. Due to the different predetermined locations, the foxes and wolves were forced to scatter and were soon ambushed. A large number of hell spiders were lurking in the buffer zone, greedily dragging the passing foxes and wolves deep into the ground after smelling the scent of living creatures. The elves were building trenches and arming the fortress with thorns and traps. When the follow-up troops of the Kingdom of Tyia arrived, they would be stationed in Fort Corwell for the next few days if there were no accidents. From here, they would shoot the most deadly arrows at the enemy. Your Majesty, all the fortifications have been completed. The elf climbed up the tower, panting, and walked quickly to the queen's side. Ignoring the sweat on his forehead that had turned sticky, he bowed and waited. Well done, Caleb. You have done an excellent job as the commander. Kasia smiled. I believe you and your warriors are exhausted after the battle and labor. Go and rest. The royal guards and I will be responsible for guarding tonight. May the heroes of the Kingdom of Tyia have a good night's sleep. Your Majesty, I'm willing to, Caleb said. Go. Kasia's voice was still gentle, but it was full of an inviolable meaning. Caleb raised his head. Her Majesty the Queen was wearing a black armor. Her snow-white hair hung down. Although there were few drops of blood on it, she was still beautiful and refined. Her eyes shone brightly, like a magnificent gem at the bottom of a crescent lake. Yes, Caleb reluctantly agreed. There was always a sense of distance in the elven queen's gentleness. Until now, no elf had been able to win her favor. In the eyes of the elves, their queen was quiet and pure, but she had a surging, pure personality. Most of the people in the Kingdom of Tyia had a blind and passionate love for her. This love was not mixed with sexual desire, but pure admiration. Elves were shy and introverted, but many elves were fanatical enough to publicly declare that they were willing to sacrifice themselves for their beloved queen, live for her, and die for her. If Kasia announced that she was going to choose a partner one day, the elves who came to apply could probably line up from the crescent lake to the oak trees. Perhaps only in front of Caesar would Kasia be so uneasy that it was unlike her. Kasia knew that she liked Caesar. First, of course, it was because of Caesar's powerful wisdom that gave her a sense of security. But the other thing that moved her was Caesar's pride. It was the kind of pride of an emperor that had no affinity with the commoners and nobles. She rarely looked directly into Caesar's eyes. In her eyes, Caesar was like the blazing sun. His dark pupils emitted golden cracks that contained the power to control life and death and the supreme glory. In any case, the elven queen was not vain. But every time Kasia looked into those eyes, she would feel dizzy. This could be considered her secret. Kasia had never mentioned it to anyone, including her god. Of course, she would not tell Caesar. Kasia was rational. The Blackwing Empire already had a queen. The forest fairies' cognition was different from the Penishade dragons. The fairies were a loyal race that would usually only have one partner in their lifetime. She did not want any harm to come to Luna, and the people of the Blackwing Empire did not like her. Moreover, she was the Elven Queen. Luna and the Black Dragon's wedding received approval and blessings, but if it was her, she would only be opposed. The Queen of the Kingdom of Tyia could not have any relationship that was not friendship with the Emperor of the Blackwing Empire. So let it be. Not everything had to have an outcome. Thunder rumbled and gloomy clouds rolled in from the other side of the sky. The elves felt uneasy for no reason. Kasia suddenly remembered that the foxes who were sent to the enemy's territory had not sent back any news for 4 hours. Alert, Your Majesty! Commander Caleb, who had just gone downstairs, ran back to the central tower at an even faster speed. The metal dragons in Castle Declan sent news that the mages' eyes were destroyed in batches. They observe a large number of Monet's army, snake scorpion beasts, hell spiders, bloodbats, and black orcs. He said breathlessly. Also, the Butchie army stationed in Claysburg also said that they observed the traces of the derivative Monet pillar. No one could have expected that the enemy's attack would come so quickly. It had only been 4 hours since the first probing contact, and Monet had already launched an unstoppable counterattack. The Allies did not even have time to rest, and the reinforcements from some countries were still on their way. Our troops have arrived. Kasia realized that the Burning Mane clan that was sent over might have been completely annihilated. However, she did not have time to think about why there was no news from the 3,000 troops. The tide of monsters was rapidly approaching in her field of vision. She took a deep breath and drew out the long sword blessed by the moon god. Warriors of the kingdom of Tyia, stand by my side and prepare for battle. Chapter 436. Eagles of Io, pick up your weapons and fight alongside me. Nielsen pulled out his sword, and the eagle emblem on his shoulder shone brightly. Similar to the other factions in the Alliance, Io had taken over Mycid Castle and used it as a military base. All of Io's forces were stationed in this castle. 10 minutes ago, Iogwo received a warning from the Metal Dragon in Fort Declan. 5 minutes ago, they saw Monet's army appear at the end of the sky like a tidal wave. Now, Monet's monsters had reached their attack range. Spellcasters. Without needing the king or the commander's orders, the high-level mages of Io's royal family had already started their preparations. Just as the snake-scorpion beasts entered their attack range, fireballs, icicles, wind blades, and rock spikes rained down on them. The green blood of the snake-scorpion beasts splattered high into the air. Broken limbs and minced meat were scattered all over their companions. They growled and approached Mycid Castle without stopping. Pike, pike! Crossbows and javelins whizzed past, pinning the huge snake-scorpion beasts to the ground. Such damage was not enough to kill them in a short period of time. However, The limited time they could not move was enough for them to be trampled into meat paste by the monsters behind them. Aside from the arrows and javelins, some of the watchtowers were also lit up with flashes of light from time to time. After reaching a series of aid deals with the Blackwing Empire, the Io nation had obtained quite a number of industrial weapons from the north. Muskets were extremely useful in defensive battles. More importantly, those black heavy cannons were able to deal as much damage as magic, or even more powerful. Before this, the Io nation, which had a low level of magical engineering, could only import magic cannons from the trading city-states. However, due to the exorbitant cost of making these magic cannons, even if the Io nation exhausted all of its resources, it was still unable to equip every single army with such a strategic weapon. Actually, compared to the Io nation, this was still considered good. It was said that the northern kingdoms, which had been reduced to history, only had less than 5 magic cannons in their entire territory. If one were to compare the magic cannons and the Blackwing heavy cannons on the same level, of course, the magic cannons would completely crush them. The magic cannons that were integrated with the pinnacle of magical engineering were more powerful, had a longer range, were easier to carry, and did not need to be reloaded. These characteristics made them the kings of Aradia's land weapons even after hundreds of years. However, the high cost of production made it so that the smaller kingdoms could not afford it. Even if they could afford it, they would not equip their armies with them. This was because the magic cannons had to be maintained by a team of mages who were proficient in magical engineering. The cost of maintaining such a team every year was an astronomical amount of money. The black heavy cannons were like a black hole. Of course, the Blackwing heavy cannons were different. Their cheap price was their biggest advantage. Furthermore, the Blackwing heavy cannons were also powerful. Nielsen had received information that the Kingdom of Bucci had done an experiment. The attack power of 5 Blackwing heavy cannons was basically comparable to that of a magic cannon. Considering the range, portability, and other characteristics, 8 Blackwing heavy cannons were completely comparable to that of a magic cannon. The most important thing was that the Northern Empire would provide supporting services for the countries and forces that purchased the Blackwing heavy cannons. If they bought 50 Blackwing heavy cannons in one go, they would be given a team of cannons. Even if some small forces did not have enough purchasing power, they could go to the Northern Empire to recruit craftsmen to maintain the Blackwing heavy cannons. It was said that these craftsmen who were given the qualification badge by the Blackwing Empire all came from a place called the Imperial Academy. Nielsen knew that they were all ordinary people. The salary needed to support them was only the same as the salary needed to hire a team of knights. This was undoubtedly good news for the countries in the north. In the past few years, after this news had gradually spread, most of the countries that had trade with the Blackwing heavy cannons began to replace them with these heavy cannons in batches. In fact, after 2 years of research, there were also workshops in the Ajo Sala region that could make imitation Blackwing heavy cannons at a lower price. However, the countries still preferred to import these weapons from the Northern Empire. Firstly, there was a difference in quality between the two. Some imitation Blackwing heavy cannons were said to explode when fired. Secondly, they mainly bought the repair team of the Northern Empire. The Empire would provide a replacement service for the heavy cannons with serious problems. Some of the problems that the local craftsmen could not handle could also be sent to the Empire for repair. Thirdly, buying the Blackwing heavy cannons was, in a sense, also a purchase guarantee. This point was not discussed in depth, and the countries would not put it on the surface. There were 50 Blackwing heavy cannons in Mycad Castle. When the enemy was placed in the maximum killing zone, these heavy cannons roared and opened fire in unison. The scene was undoubtedly shocking. The sound of thunder exploded on the castle wall. Solid iron balls spewed out with sparks and smashed into the enemy group. With unstoppable force, they crushed the lives of the enemies and plowed out bloody gullies one after another. Iogwo suppressed the monsters with absolute firepower. But just when Nielsen felt that victory was in his hands, a new sea appeared on the other side of the earth. The black tide covered the horizon. The long tails of the second group of monsters were twisted together. Their scales were shining like metal. They kept wriggling, approaching at a speed that was several times faster than the snake-scorpion beasts and the hell spiders. Under the observation of the magician's eye, these creatures were like a group of snakes entwined together, but they had the head and sharp teeth of a dragon. Viper dragons. Nielsen's hand trembled as he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. According to the analysis of the metal dragon race, the Viper dragons were Monet's main combat force. They were as strong as dragons, with hard scales and powerful strength. These Viper dragons were refined by Quell Dorii technology. They were complete machines. Retreat. He squeezed out a word after a long while. Your Majesty, we're almost there. The commander turned to look at him. The moment he pulled his line of sight, he saw the Viper dragons surging toward them like a black tide. He quickly looked at the magician's eye, thought for a moment, and changed his words. Your Majesty, the Blackwing Empire has agreed to let them deal with the Viper dragons. I think the Empire should have noticed the Viper dragons before us. As long as we hold on. Do you want all my soldiers to die here? I said retreat. Nielsen took a deep breath and interrupted him. He seemed to have made up his mind and said quickly, this is not disobeying. We did not receive an order to hold on when facing a strong enemy. The Viper dragons can only be stopped by the Blackwing Empire. Quick! Retreat in batches while there is still time. Use the teleportation circle. Yes, Your Majesty. The commander also said quickly. Do you need a first? Don't you understand what I'm saying? Casa, let the troops near the teleportation circle leave first. Seeing the Viper dragons getting closer and closer, Nielsen almost roared. Then Myket Castle and these heavy cannons. Give up if you can't take them away. Nielsen forcefully took over the command and ordered the troops to leave one by one. Soon, as the firepower of Myket Castle weakened, some of the snake-scorpion beasts gradually climbed up the city walls. The Viper dragons were also closing in quickly. They could already see the figures walking on the city walls with their naked eyes and let out sharp screeches like women. Kasago. Nielsen pierced the snake-scorpion beast's chest with his sword. The king's guard beside him quickly filled in the gap. Your Majesty, damn it. Don't you understand what I'm saying? Nielsen suddenly kicked the commander without any bearing of a king and kicked him towards the teleportation circle. Scram! Seeing that Kassar had also brought a troop into the teleportation circle, Nielsen's sweat-stained face finally relaxed. There was still plenty of time. The Viper dragon did not arrive as quickly as he had imagined. He took a deep breath and said to the remaining guards and the king's personal guards on the wall, All right, let's get ready. Before he could finish, the city walls shook violently. Chapter 437. Did the Nephilim dig through the wall? This was the first thought that popped into Nielsen's mind. However, he soon realized that his judgment was wrong. The ground beneath Myket Castle was indeed churning, but outside the wall, he saw waves of earth arching and piling up along the wall, as if something huge was surging underground. Before he could take a closer look, Nielsen heard a roar from the sky behind him. He looked up, then immediately lowered his body. A flying dragon almost brushed his hair as it flew past. Nielsen half-squatted and looked back. He did not know when, but a black cloud had risen behind Myket Castle. Flying dragons with huge wings swept past Myket Castle and pounced forward. They had arrived at the Blackwing Empire. It felt as if the black clouds in the sky and the waves on the surface of the earth had met, and a fierce battle broke out as soon as they came into contact. The flying dragons roared and stretched out their sharp claws, quickly clearing away the snake-scorpion servants near Myket Castle. Some of the flying dragons were completely black and had a flame emblem on their forehead. They could even spit out dragon breath like real dragons. Fire, frost, and strong acid were all used together, dealing a huge blow to the snake-scorpion servants in the vanguard. In front of the ferocious flying dragons, the snake-scorpion and the spiders were just pitiful food. When these originally tall and strong creatures were hunted down by even taller and stronger creatures, their struggles and resistance became weak and powerless. Many of the flying dragons used their sharp claws to pierce into the sides of the snake scorpion's body, tearing out the bloody muscles and blood vessels. Then, they carried the snake scorpion into the sky and ate it while fighting with their companions. Seeing the black-winged flying dragons clearing away the enemies at a speed as fast as mincing meat, Nielsen was not in a hurry to leave. He slowly stood up, holding onto the ancient wall of Mycid Castle as he looked down. The viper dragon in the distance was about to join the battle, and the flying dragons near it were also ready to attack. The battle between Monet's viper dragon and the black-winged flying dragons would undoubtedly be exciting. Nielsen did not want to miss this feast. Besides, he also wanted to take this opportunity to understand the true strength of Monet and Blackwing. Whether it was Monet or Blackwing, to the countries in the Alsala region, they were both mysterious and majestic mountains. Unfortunately, the Blackwing Empire did not seem to be prepared to give the spectators the opportunity to watch a bloody battle. The wyverns did not launch an attack. After clearing out the snake-scorpion beasts and hell spiders around Mycid Castle, they flapped their wings and hovered in the air, waiting quietly. The next moment, Nielsen saw traces of ant eggs. Countless ant eggs poked their heads out of the ground and worked together. In less than 30 seconds, a wide and flat tunnel leading from the ground to the surface appeared. Nielsen heard a rumbling sound. White smoke surged to the ground. The first thing Nielsen saw was a thick and long iron pipe. Looking down, he saw a wide and thick iron chain. The huge iron chain twisted together and kept rotating. In the sharp sound of gears and machinery, it pushed something like an iron fortress out of the underground tunnel. "Tango," Nielsen said in a low voice. Iogwo had been invited to attend the Blackwing Empire's Galanaud ceremony. He had received information about this weapon called Tango from the emissary group he sent. However, the information was only a few words. Apart from showing their figures at the Galanaud Empire's wedding, these Tango had not had any chance to show their faces and had not participated in any battles. He saw that the Tango came in different sizes. On the left rear side of the bulge, at the end of their thick iron pipe, there was a small circular opening. A goblin wearing goggles poked its head out, its head tilted downwards as it cried out. It was unknown who it was saying something to. The white smoke spewed out by the Tango covered the sky above Mycid Castle. Even the figures of the wyverns became hazy. Low rumbling sounds rose and fell one after another. The Blackwing Empire's goblin-armored army appeared on the battlefield of Mycid. The tanks lined up under the city wall and adjusted their aim to the southeast. Hundreds of cannonballs slid from the magazine into the launch rail. They moved. They did not wait for the Viper Dragon to enter their attack range. They moved forward and attacked at the same time. When it fired, it made a strange sound. After the shocking roar, there was also a dense and sharp sound of metal vibrating. It was the sound of the shell leaving the barrel and leaving a long echo in the cannon. This unique sound was unforgettable for Nielsen. He swore that he had never seen such a scene in his life. The cannonballs like light crashed straight into the group of Viper Dragons and then exploded again. All the Viper Dragons in a small area were enveloped by the tornado-like impact. They were blown to pieces and exploded into a cloud of blood. The earth was burning fiercely. The black tide, that was swarming like a tide, was met with a waterfall of cannon fire. Thousands of corpses rose and fell in the black tide. His companions who were still alive dragged the corpses and continued to move forward. But the second wave of attack followed, so fast that Nielsen was inexplicably horrified. The sharp teeth and claws were vulnerable in front of these weapons. Round after round of bombardment pushed back the raging black tide. The speed of the Viper Dragon tide became slower and slower. They roared unwillingly. Finally, they stopped, retreated, turned around, and left. The sun shone through the gaps in the dark clouds, and the heavy tanks stood majestically, as brilliant as the gods of steel. "It's over," Caesar said softly. This kind of large-scale frontal attack tactic might work against an army that did not have strong magical abilities, but against an armored goblin army, it was no different from suicide. The leader of the Viper Dragon spawn also seemed to know the severity of the situation. He did not want to let the Viper Dragons die in this place. After all, even if they could get close to the enemy, the flying dragons that were eyeing them covetously were still a huge threat to them. Before Monet appeared, Caesar did not even go to the front lines. He was still in the bronze fortress, watching the situation of the battle with a few metal dragons that were left behind with the mage's eye. Our tribe's Fort Declan has already repelled the invasion. Fort Farazzi's Wolfhar Foxes has also completed their defense with the help of the Penachet dragons. Io has withdrawn from Fort Mykid and replaced it with the Blackwing Empire. Fort Malik has already taken over Fort Malik. The bronze dragon beside him said respectfully. During a joint battle, everyone had to have absolute respect for the Emperor of the Blackwing Empire. They could not leave him. Now, only Fort Clyce and Fort Kovar are still under attack. Near Fort Kovar, a large number of black orcs are pouring into the battlefield. A dragon that was watching the battle intently reminded him. Black orcs. Caesar did not remember Iradia having such a race. They should be a new species created by Monet. Their appearance is very similar to the ancient orcs of the Second Era, but their skin is black. We call them black orcs. The bronze dragon introduced. According to inaccurate energy surveys, these black orcs are stronger than the snake-scorpion beasts in the Nether tribe. They are slightly weaker than the viper dragons. Caesar picked up the teacup from the table and was suddenly stunned. Fort Kovar? Fort Kovar? He stood up quickly. Yes, Fort Kovar is under attack by the Black Orcs and is in a difficult battle. We have already contacted the army of the Malha Kingdom at Fort Clyce and asked them to immediately head to this. Before the Bronze Dragon could finish speaking, the Black King smashed open the gate of the fort like a monster. His body quickly stretched into a huge 50-meter-tall figure as he ran. With a rumble, he leaped into the sky and left a few long crimson flames behind him. Chapter 438. Time passed. The war drums rumbled like thunder. The spells of the Naira spiders bombarded the fortress time and time again, shaking the walls of the fortress. Rubble fell from the explosions. Garcia steadied herself and, together with the elven guards and rangers beside her, turned sideways, drew her bow, knocked an arrow, and prepared to shoot. The surging power made her white hair float in the air. She aimed and released the arrow. The arrows whistled as they were shot out, leaving a gust of air in their wake. The bodies of these consumable arrows were made from oak wood from the elven forest, while the arrowheads were manufactured from the Northern Empire. The tips were sharp and laced with lethal poison. It accurately struck a hell spider that was waving its forelimbs, piercing through its lower jaw. Garcia's additional strength caused its skull to explode into a spray of blood. Garcia didn't have the time to wait for the result. The moment the arrow was released, she reached for a new arrow from the quiver behind her back. She knocked the arrow, pulled the bowstring back, aimed, and released the bowstring again like a machine. "Keep shooting," she said. It was not difficult to stop the snake-scorpion beasts. They just had to keep suppressing them with their firepower. The key problem was the Naira spiders who were constantly casting spells in the distance. The spellcasters of the Kingdom of Tyia could not continuously cast protection spells, but if they were allowed to continue attacking, the outer walls of the fortress would collapse sooner or later. And this was not the real danger. Further away, Garcia saw many black-skinned orcs joining the attacking troops and rushing down from the mountainside. Black-skinned orcs? Garcia squinted her eyes and looked carefully. The divine blessing had greatly enhanced her abilities in all aspects, so she could see the black orcs clearly from afar. They were equipped with armor and weapons like the orcs of Iradia, but there were still many differences apart from their skin. The slender fangs and sharp claws made these orcs look even more terrifying. Pairs of bright red eyes were connected together like a swarm of scarlet bees. These were Monet's new spawn. Garcia understood that Quell Dorii had created a terrifying monster to fight against the dragon god. It had the power of a god in the prime material plane of Iradia. After its awakening, It began to create powerful races that appeared in Iradia's history and reappeared in the world. The Naira, the Viper, the Bloodbats, and now the Black Orcs. Moreover, they were different from Monet's other minions. Their naked bodies were covered in thick, heavy armor, and they held battle axes, heavy hammers, and machetes in their hands. These things had never been seen in Monet's army before. They were based on the ancient orcs of the past, and they were no different from a nightmare to the current Eladian creatures. Have you sent a message to the Alliance asking for help? Garcia frowned. The enemy's army was getting bigger and bigger. We have been keeping in touch with the Alliance. According to the information given by the Bronze Citadel, these Black Orcs are second only to the Viper. They are also the main fighting force of Monet's army. The Alliance has asked us to be cautious. Reinforcements from the neighboring Malha Kingdom are on their way. The teleportation circle between the castles has not been completed yet. Garcia shot another arrow. I'm afraid they won't be able to get here so quickly. She quickly thought about the current situation. Obviously, the Alliance had determined that the Taya Kingdom could not stop the Black Orcs. Otherwise, they would not have asked for reinforcements from the Malha Kingdom. Garcia estimated that they would not be able to stop the Black Orcs either. From the very beginning, Monet's army did not intend to take down all the strategic fortresses. In fact, there were only two real targets, Fort Mikid and Fort Kovar. Only these two fortresses had the main battle forces present. The rest were just cannon fodder. We have to take the initiative, Garcia suddenly said after thinking for a while. Caleb, take the initiative. The Elven Queen's tone was firm. At this rate, the Naira Spider's spells will destroy the walls of the fortress sooner or later. Without the defense of the outer walls, the Taya Kingdom will suffer more casualties in close combat. We have to eliminate the Naira Spiders before the Black Orcs regroup with them. But, Caleb struggled. Your Majesty, I think we can choose to retreat. The Alliance did not ask us to defend the fortress. These monsters can't hold it. We can take it back after we regroup with the reinforcements. Retreating is undoubtedly a wise choice. Garcia nodded. Then she asked the warriors of the Taya Kingdom, are they willing to leave? Caleb looked around in confusion. He found that almost every elf was staring at the front with a determined gaze, holding their hard bows and sharp swords tightly. Since we have decided to join this crusade, we will not back down easily. Our enemies are evil creatures who strive to destroy the world. Why should we show weakness in front of these monsters? The Taya Kingdom will use blood and swords to proclaim our country's name to Iradia. For glory, we will never back down. Garcia repeated her words. Her tone became firmer and firmer until it was unquestionable. Let the Chimera troops prepare. The artillery troops provide cover. Reinvigorate your spirits, warriors of the Taya Kingdom. Let's go. She climbed onto the back of the Chimera Magusher and raised her shining longsword. For the Taya Kingdom. For the Taya Kingdom. They shouted in unison. In Iradia, the king and the monarch may not be the bravest in the country, but the weak and cowardly rarely took on the responsibilities of king. This was because in this world, in most major battles, the highest-ranking officer in the army had to take the lead and lead the charge to boost morale. Garcia rode the Chimera over the roaring and leaping snake scorpions below. The Chimera constantly changed its direction in the air and moved forward in a curve. With its high speed, they could actually cut into the formation of the Naira Spiders faster and kill 2 to 3 of them easily with the Chimera's sharp claws and Garcia's own sword. However, if they charged straight at the spiders, she and Magusher would soon be in danger. If the Griffin Knights wanted to defeat the spellcasters, they must not let the spellcasters capture their movements. The Elf Queen's decision was undoubtedly correct. However, the Netherlings from the first era were not a group of mindless puppets. On the contrary, they were quite intelligent. After discovering that their overwhelming magic attacks were unable to cause any effective damage to their enemies, the spiders actually admitted defeat. Whenever the chimeras chose to dive down to attack, the spiders in the area they targeted would give up on attacking and defending and directly burrow into the ground to avoid the breath attacks and sharp blades. Damn it, Seeing this scene, even the elven queen could not help but curse in a low voice. Chapter 439. Their only option was to land on the ground. Garcia had no choice but to land on the ground with her aerial troops. The ground was filled with minced meat. She tried her best to ignore the feeling of soil beneath her feet, but she could not escape the stench of exposed intestines and organs. She could not shut off her sense of smell. Every inch of her senses was crucial on the battlefield. Flesh and bones are like grass. My body is like a blade. The Naira spiders screeched and pounced forward. Garcia could no longer see anything else. As soon as she landed, black and purple spiders filled her entire field of vision. Fortunately, she still had her companions behind her. Her sword glowed like the moon, and the strong chimera Magusher roared beside her. The elves and the Naira spiders were from the same era. Her ancestors had once fought against them. In the first era, the elves saw the Naira spiders as their enemies. They also respected the spiders who built a glorious civilization in the underground world. But now, they had become Monet's minions, puppets without consciousness. Garcia wanted to exterminate them as soon as possible. 100 Blackwing heavy cannons roared at the same time. Cannonballs flew toward them like divine punishment. The troops from Fort Corver provided them with the greatest assistance. In the end, 1/3 of the cannonballs tore through the spiders' magical defenses and flew over Garcia's head, inflicting heavy damage to the Naira spiders. 1 out of every 3 spiders fell. At this time, Garcia stood at the front of the troops and faced the Naira spiders. She raised her sword and faced the terrifying faces of the Naira spiders. She could fully observe many details, such as the mounds on the ground, the dark and deep cave entrance, the broken limbs that were blown away by the cannonballs, the forelimbs of the enemies that were close to her that were covered with tiny spikes, their fangs dripping with black venom, their scarlet compound eyes of different sizes, and the fine hairs on their bulging abdomens. She swung her sword and slashed horizontally. The light of the moon god erupted from Garcia's sword. Amidst the sound of skin, flesh, and bones being torn apart, 2 spiders were split in half. She walked forward, and the huge chimera pounced forward to help her smash the enemy on her left. At this time, a large group of Naira spiders began to cast buff spells on themselves and entered melee combat. This was actually good news for the Taya Kingdom. They were not afraid of the Naira spiders fighting them, but they were afraid that the spiders would retreat and join the Black Orcs. Garcia led the Rangers and charged across the smoking ground, screaming and shouting. The divine blessing made her body light and strong, and her mind was filled with fire. Her blade cut the fangs of the spiders into pieces. The battle was bloody and dull, and her ears were filled with the screams of the spiders and the roars of the elves. Rain finally began to fall from the thick clouds, mixing with the blood to form small streams. Cage's armor had long been dyed red, and his sword-wielding arm emitted a strong smell of blood. The Rangers on the city wall were constantly monitoring the movements of the Black Beastmen, which meant that they were about to arrive at the battlefield. It's time to retreat, Garcia told herself. However, the Naira spiders suddenly changed their strategy. They seemed to have made up their minds to drag the Taya Kingdom's troops to death. The remaining spiders became even more ferocious. They no longer kept their distance like before. Instead, they swarmed forward and tangled with the elves. Even some of the scorpions that were attacking the wall gave up on their strategic target. They turned around and surrounded the elves, ignoring the attacks from the wall. At this moment, the remaining hell spiders had all rushed to the front, and the elves were also eager to continue the slaughter. Caught in the middle, the stench of blood and sweat almost suffocated Garcia. The poisonous fangs in front of her and the sword and shield behind her forced her to stay still. She only had 2 options to move: to continue forward or to cut down the soldiers behind her. In this situation, the elves would suffer a heavy blow as soon as they turned around and retreated. "Your Majesty, we have achieved our goal. You should leave some warriors behind and retreat immediately." Caleb's voice became urgent. This was undoubtedly the rational choice. But from Garcia's point of view, She had no other choice but to hope that she and her companions could fight their way out before the black orcs arrived. The sky became even darker. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and rain poured down. The enemy would not give up. Every time she killed a hell spider, another one would appear in front of her, or a second, or a third. She slashed continuously until her arms were about to give out. Garcia could only hear her own breathing and could only see blood flowing and broken limbs flying up and down. After an unknown period of time, the sky in front of her finally cleared up. She could no longer see any traces of the spider in the heavy rain. Is it over? Garcia raised her head. She was just about to give the order to retreat when she realized that they were surrounded by tall and strong black beastmen. Their dry cheeks made them look like towering rocks in the storm. They did not attack. They did not even make a sound. They just stood there silently. A sense of danger gripped the hearts of the elves like ghosts in the middle of the night. The elves dragged their stiff arms and legs. The surviving seven-headed chimeras walked with heavy steps. With Garcia as the center, they slowly gathered together to confront the black orcs. Stalling for time was obviously more advantageous for the Taya elves, but for some reason, the black orcs did not attack. Garcia tried her best to take in fresh air. The intense heartbeat in her ears slowly calmed down. After a while, the elf queen felt that she had recovered a lot of her strength. All right, elf. Kaladin Skarral wants to give you a chance to fight a fair battle. An orc taller than the other black orcs picked up his huge machete and walked as he spoke. But I know that your reinforcements are on the way, so you only have this time to rest. Kaladin Skarral? Garcia felt that the name was a little familiar. Wrong. The black orc shook his head and firmly denied what he had just said. My name is Kaladin Monet. Garcia realized that the black orc was a derivative, but this derivative seemed to be different from the ones described by the Alliance. Help! Help! The commander on the far wall was crazily issuing orders. Through the spell link, the orders were transmitted to Garcia's ears. The gate of Fort Corver, which had been closed all this time, suddenly opened. No one hesitated. The military forces of the Taya Kingdom were almost all out, ready to rescue their queen at any cost. Garcia leaned on her sword, a guilty look on her face. Kaladin also saw this scene. Looking at the elves swarming over, the black orc derivative's face gradually showed disdain. As a long-lived species, the elves have long lives and impressive talents. But you have never been able to occupy a place in Iradia. You are too emotional. For sudden emotions and so-called justice and kindness, you can do anything. You overestimate yourselves and act recklessly. I didn't expect that after so many years, you still haven't made any progress. Chapter 440. Garcia was shocked. She had never heard of such a case of a derivative in the information she had received from the Alliance. Whether it was the demon Baylor, the beetle Inubalak, or the giant snake Hydra, none of them had such rich emotional changes. And from the words of the black orc derivative, it seemed to know more. You are not a derivative? The elven queen asked, try to stall for time as much as possible. The Taya Kingdom's reinforcements were about to enter the battlefield, and the neighboring Marja Castle's reinforcements were also on their way. Of course, you're surprised that I have my own thoughts and emotions, but there's no need for that. Kaladin stretched his muscles as he spoke. I'm different from the other derivatives. They're just tools that Monet implanted with intelligence after he created them. I'm different because I know who I am. Who are you? At the same time, he glanced behind him discreetly. Kaladin Scarran. That was my name in the past, but I'm long dead just like them. He pointed at the silent black orcs behind him and said calmly, but Gush rejected us. He shamefully fled the battlefield, abandoned his people, betrayed his glory, and disappeared without a trace. The gates of the divine kingdom were closed, and the orcs had nowhere to place their souls. They could only enter hell or stay in some dark corners of Iradia to hide and tremble until Monet woke up. I don't know how the mother did it either. It allowed our souls to recover and regain their vitality and created a body that could house the orcs' souls. Now, we're fighting in the name of Monet. You can call us undead orcs, sacred orcs, or new orcs. I think dark orcs are more appropriate, Jessie said with a cold smile. She had never liked the dark side of things. Moreover, the elves and the orcs were mortal enemies. It doesn't matter. You can call me whatever you want. Kaladin, the leader of the dark orcs, turned around and grabbed the hilt of the giant black blade again. He pulled it out of the ground lightly. Even if I know you're stalling for time, I still want to say more because I haven't spoken for many years. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow it. Then let's begin. His voice suddenly became ferocious, and he growled, "Kill them all! Roar!" The chimeras roared threateningly. But this was of no use. The elves were immediately besieged, and the dark beastmen all rushed forward. However, Garcia wasn't one of them. The only person in front of her was Carlo Dan, who was slowly approaching her with a giant blade. "You seem to be the king here. I'll give you a fair duel." As soon as he finished speaking, the derivative began to accelerate. Garcia took a deep breath and slightly bowed towards the dark beastman Kaladin. Instead of retreating, she began to charge forward. Her movements were exactly the same as the beastman's. She gripped her long sword tightly and prepared for battle. The feedback she received from her senses told her that her opponent was strong, extremely strong, and rarely seen in her life. Both of them pushed off the ground at the same time, their knees bursting with extraordinary energy. One was swift, and the other was firm and fierce. Their bodies drew out two trajectories as they moved at high speed. They leaped, and the edges of their weapons collided in the air. The expected wrestling segment did not appear. Garcia was directly sent flying, and the elven queen slammed into the ground in the distance. Her calves all sank into the ground below her knees. The opponent's strength was much greater than she had imagined. She looked around and found that most of the other elves had also suffered heavy injuries. These dark beastmen could even pull the chimeras. In terms of strength, they were on a completely different level from the elves. Their original form was not the beastmen of the Third Era, but the ancient beastmen that had not been cursed. Garcia took a deep breath and pulled her leg out of the deep mud. Before she could even think, the dark beastman leader rushed in front of her like a cannonball. He closed in, leaped, and slashed. The elven queen could not achieve such explosive speed and strength. She could only block with her sword horizontally and use her other hand to support the blade. The giant blade slashed heavily on the long blade. Garcia blocked it, but what followed was a storm of slashes. The second time, the third time, the fourth time, each slash was faster and heavier than the previous one. In the end, the elven queen could not withstand the continuous attacks and knelt down on one knee. No matter how soft the ground was, it could not withstand such a huge force. The bones in her hands were shattered, and she could barely hold her sword. But this was not the end. No matter if it was the ancient beastmen, dark beastmen, or dark beastmen, they would not show mercy at this time. After the elven queen knelt down, Kaladin immediately kicked her abdomen. The kick was like a titan's iron hoof, and the spikes on the beastman's iron boots pierced through Garcia's abdomen. The huge force threw her into the sky, and then she was pulled back to the ground by gravity. Bang! Smoke and dust filled the air. Before the smoke and dust dispersed, Kaladin had already come to this place. He did not say a word as he dragged his giant blade forward. The sound of the blade rubbing against the ground gradually approached, like the slow tolling of the death god's bell. Cough, cough. No one believed that Garcia could still stand up, but she did it. The elf queen's eyes were completely covered in white light, and her body was overflowing with waves of divinity. Her injuries were quickly healing, and her broken bones were reconnected. Her long sword, which already had cracks on it, was covered in white flames. She stared at the dark orc, and her posture was cold and inviolable. God's favor. Although it was a questioning tone, Kaladin did not show any surprise on his face. He raised his left hand and pinched the back of his neck. He raised his head slightly and said, "I really envy you lucky creatures." When he put down his hand, he was no longer immortal. Kaladin's scarlet eyes turned sharp, and his body swelled, to 3 meters tall. His muscles bulged and stacked like small hills, and dense veins appeared on the surface of his skin. He looked as ferocious as an abyss demon. The Dark Beastman leader activated his bloodline power and stepped into the legendary realm. From this moment on, the majestic divine energy allowed Garcia to cast spells without restraint. She raised her hand, and the elements instantly gathered at her fingertips, condensing into a raging blade. The moment Kaladin took a step forward, the storm of blades left the cage. The blade storm flew through the huge space, and every time it collided with each other, it would let out an extremely unpleasant sound of friction. The loose ground was swept up by the huge amount of energy and mixed with the materialized blades as they charged towards the charging Dark Beastmen. Elements bloomed. Stars fell. Sparks. Flame explosion. When Kaladin stood in front of Garcia again, he was covered in blood. However, this guy did not have any expression of pain on his face, and his movements were as fierce as before. Garcia was forced to fight him in close range again. She actually had a way to close the distance and use spells to attack Kaladin, but there were elves fighting the Dark Beastman everywhere, and she was afraid of accidentally injuring her own. Why? Garcia was shocked by the orc's transformation. He could not help but ask as he continued to parry. You told me that this is a body created by Monet. How can such a body use the ancient orc's bloodline power? Kaladin heard her words and did not mind giving an explanation, but his words were almost a growl due to the fierce attacks. Because you don't understand where our power comes from. You think it's from our bloodline? You are gravely mistaken. It was a powerful blow. Garcia instinctively dodged, but the Dark Beastman's left arm, which had turned into a claw, covered her and hindered her movements. She had no choice but to change from dodging to defending. The giant blade hit the queen's radiant longsword, and the power tore her flesh again. But this was an opportunity. Garcia took advantage of the gap when the Dark Beastman raised his sword a second time, endured the pain in her arm, and stabbed the longsword at Kaladin's chest as fast as lightning. The white flames on the radiant longsword burned fiercely, and it would only take a second to burn the blood and organs. The elves' fighting skills are really terrible, Kaladin said inexplicably. The next moment, he grabbed the longsword with his left hand, grabbed it, and locked it. The surging white flames almost burned through his hand, and the smell of burnt flesh filled the air. But the Dark Beastman did not care, and showed an "I'm sorry" expression to Garcia. The giant blade came again. The screams of metal, the cries of flesh, and the screams of bones. The sharp blade tore the queen's armor, cut open the queen's abdomen, and cut the queen's bones. The giant blade came out from her back, and the fragrant red blood of the elves gushed out from the wound. Under the extremely high blood pressure, it was like a flood that broke the dam. The elven queen was sent flying and fell like a kite with a broken string. Even the divine energy supporting her body could not withstand the huge force, and the Dark Beastman's final attack almost separated her body. Your Majesty! This scene made many elves scream in the distance. Garcia was as light as a leaf, and she floated into the distance and fell on her back. The soil under her body was quickly soaked in blood, and her breath gradually weakened. Her white hair spread out like a flower blooming in a pool of blood. Chapter 441. Your Majesty. The commander, who arrived late on his unicorn, let out a roar of fear and despair. He watched as the Elf King fell to the ground with his blood. He felt as if the world had turned dark. My queen! It was hard to imagine that the elves could also make such beast-like sounds. Many people were watching the battlefield and saw the Elf King being cut open at the waist and making a sound as if he was on the verge of death. They all wished that they could be the ones to take the cut. This battle will end only if we die. The commander roared and charged forward. Behind him, there were many people. At this point, the Taya Kingdom's army had all joined the battlefield. Only if we die. Under the heavy black rain, the elves roared in unison. None of them retreated. They all grasped their arrows and sharp swords and charged at the tall dark orcs as if they were committing suicide. Kaladin didn't say anything. He twisted his neck and returned to his previous state. He walked in the direction where the Elf King fell. He knew how heavy that cut was. No mortal could survive such an injury. However, the other party was the Elf King, so Kaladin wasn't 100% sure that he could kill him in one hit. So it was best to cut off that woman's head. At the same time, it could also serve as his first spoils of war. In front of Kaladin were the king's guards who were closest to Garcia. They had been rushing over when the queen was no match for the orcs. However, they were surrounded by the fierce dark orcs and only now arrived in front of the dark orc leader. Kill him. The elf's voice was hoarse and muddy. It was unknown whether it was rain or tears flowing down their faces. You call her your majesty. Does that mean that the person I just defeated is a king? Kaladin walked forward and nodded in agreement. His voice was very clear and didn't sound like he had just gone through a battle. A king should have a martyr. The other dark orcs silently retreated and joined the battle, leaving Kaladin alone to deal with the elven guards. The elves rushed forward without hesitation. They unsheathed their swords and waved them in a circle. They weren't sure that they could kill Kaladin, but they were determined to fight like moths to a flame. Fighting the dark orc leader wasn't difficult. They just needed to die. Even if they had to scratch, or bite, they had to do their best to injure him. As long as everyone could injure him, this damned orc would die. The elf had already thrown caution to the wind. Unfortunately, this was not a battle, but an execution. Is that all? Too weak. In just one round, the elf at the front of the team had his chest pierced through, and before he could raise his sword halfway, the second elf had his head cut off without a single pause. It was only now that the elves realized just how strong the queen's enemy was, and this made them hate themselves for not being able to help in time. You don't even have the right to be buried with me. A huge force tore through the armor, splitting the elf into two from top to bottom. Kaladin twisted his giant blade and nailed an elf to the ground. His calm expression suddenly changed, and his smooth attacks stopped for a moment. He looked up at the thick clouds in the sky and muttered to himself, "It seems that something is coming. I'm afraid we need to retreat. That thing's target is here." An orc next to him said. This orc's clothing was completely different from the other dark orcs. He was wearing a light gray robe, and his exposed arms were particularly thin. Because he hadn't done anything in the entire war, his presence was particularly weak. But no one would have thought that there was a spellcaster among the dark beastmen, the shaman priest who had already gone extinct. "Wait for me," Kaladin said. After he finished speaking, he once again entered his fierce bloodline state. He cut down the chimera, blocking his way, and strode forward. Kaladin's speed of killing the elves was several times faster than before, but there were still many elves rushing towards him, hindering his advance. These elves didn't even care about the others. They only had Kaladin in their eyes. Their eyes were red, and there was blood at the corner of their mouths. They wanted to tear off every piece of flesh from his body. No matter how strong Kaladin was, it would still take time to swing his sword, and the elves in front of him were almost endless. He didn't know what kind of power was forcing them to be so reckless. "Chief, we should retreat," the dark shaman reminded. He had just released a chain of lightning to clear some of the obstacles for Kaladin. "I know. It'll be soon," Kaladin said. The more the shaman urged him and the more the elves obstructed him, the more he felt that the situation was wrong. His intuition told him that even if he didn't cut off the head of the elf queen, he had to see that woman die with his own eyes. It's too late. Not waiting for Kaladin's voice to fade, the black shaman let out a loud roar, and the long-prepared large-scale teleportation spell instantly took shape. With Kaladin as the center, all the beastmen within 500 meters were teleported. The next moment, the curtain of rain exploded, and a resplendent beam of light cut through the battlefield from the other side of the sky. It pierced through the place where Kaladin was originally standing. Rock layers surged, and the ground trembled. A huge, bottomless black hole appeared. 10 seconds later, the elves saw the huge and heavy figure of the Black Dragon Emperor in the clouds. Caesar arrived almost at lightning speed. Behind his wings, there were not only flames, but also ear-piercing screeches that cut through the air, as well as strong pressure waves that were generated at supersonic speeds that were transmitted to the ground. The black dragon left the sound behind and landed on the battlefield first. He saw Garcia in the ruins. Her body was almost cut in half. Her spine, which was the most important part of a creature's skeleton, was completely broken. Her broken ribs pierced into her organs, and her cut muscles were covered in blood. Her body was only barely glued together by a little bit of skin. When Caesar held her up, her body was as light as a sheet. The black dragon was even worried that he would crush her if he used too much strength. But miraculously, Garcia was still alive. She could breathe, and her eyes were as bright as ever. "I'm sorry." Seeing the black and gold pupils of the black dragon, Garcia whispered with blood in her mouth, "You're right. I shouldn't have come. The kingdom of Tyia is unable to support such a large-scale war. I'm too weak. I'm sorry. You look terrible now." The black dragon's voice was gentle. "Very ugly. Is that so?" Garcia tried her best to squeeze out a smile. "You won't die," Caesar said as he checked her wound. Even divine power could not save a dying person, but the energy of the moon god helped her gain some time to breathe. Such an injury would have killed her instantly, but Garcia held on for a long time until the black dragon arrived. Now, the divine energy was slowly dissipating, but it was enough. The black dragon's sharp claws pierced through the skin and added a new wound to Garcia. The elven queen no longer had the strength to struggle. She could only look at him with her bright eyes. Caesar released radiation. A small amount of radiation. This level of radiation could not distort a creature's thoughts, nor could it increase the strength of life. The side effects could also cause the recipient to have unpredictable and irreversible aberration reactions. But there was a very important point. It could save lives. Yggdrasil will heal you. Caesar looked at the elven queen's eyes that were slowly closing. Her beautiful eyelashes were trembling slightly. The first thing that would happen after being exposed to radiation would be a sharp pain, as if the soul was dislocated. Garcia, who was already severely injured, was in so much pain that she could not even move her fingers. The black dragon comforted her in a low voice. "Go to sleep. You'll be fine when you wake up." After about 7 seconds, the black dragon slowly put down the elven queen, who was in a state of suspended animation. The elves quickly gathered around her and placed her under heavy protection. After taking another look and making sure that there was no problem, Caesar slowly stood up. His voice was very calm as he asked the elves next to him, "Who beat her up like this?" Chapter 442. Long story short, within a minute, the elven soldier told the Black Dragon Emperor about the whole process and the cause and effect of the incident. Caesar closed his eyes. Due to the high-speed fusion breath, the opponent's spellcaster did not have the time to erase the traces after the teleportation. Although psionic energy could not provide the effect of teleportation, it was still very easy for the Black Dragon to track the opponent's whereabouts. In 5 seconds, the Black Dragon had already determined the approximate location of the opponent's final destination. Chase. According to the information provided by the Tyia Kingdom, there could not be a second spellcaster in the enemy army. In other words, in the next hour after completing a teleportation, the Dark Orcs could only rely on various kinds of buff spells to hurry on their feet. 1 hour was enough. Caesar only needed 2 hours to fly back to the Blackwing Empire from the Arzala area. The Black Dragon Emperor handed the remaining orcs on the battlefield to the reinforcements of Marja and the Tyia Kingdom. Once again, he spread his fierce wings and rose into the sky, leaving behind a huge sonic boom cloud before disappearing. Kaladin pushed aside the brambles in front of him and stepped into the swamp filled with a rotten smell. The overly moist soil caused his feet to sink by 20 centimeters. The dark beastmen could only stagger forward at the speed of a turtle in this kind of terrain. "Damn it," he cursed in a low voice. "Do we have to go this way?" "Luca, this is the complete opposite direction. We are returning to the front line through a tortuous route." This is the path we want to take, great chief, the shaman said. The shaman said, that life form's speed is beyond our imagination. He can leave sound behind him. Kaladin, you know how much resistance he will have to endure from the material plane. A mortal's body will be decomposed in that state. I know very well, Kaladin said. So we have to retreat. But tell me now, why do we have to go back? Because of thought. The shaman pointed at his head with his sharp claws. When I left, I had already erased the traces of the spell. If he, or it, finds the destination of our teleportation, without clear guidance, he or it will subconsciously chase after us to the south and eventually pass by us. You think he can catch up with us? Kaladin asked. Possibly. The shaman did not look like he was joking at all. Although Iradia knew that spells had to be used to fight against spells, and that it was impossible to use 2 feet or 4 hooves to catch up and transfer magic, some creatures that were too powerful could indeed break people's understanding. It's never wrong to be careful, he said. You always have your reasons. That's how it was in the past. Carlodin snorted and then asked, Then, have you thought a way to remove the control? Although Monet could force them to obey his orders, he couldn't confine their thoughts. The Dark Beastmen were very grateful to Monet for helping them rebuild their bodies and put their souls in place, allowing them to walk through Iradia with new identities. They were also willing to fight for Monet, but not in this way. At the moment, no. The shaman shook his head. The only way to get out of control is to abandon this flesh shell, but in the end, everything will return to the beginning unless we can create a new body for ourselves and survive in a way similar to the undead. Then I can't bear it. Kaladin reached out and grabbed a swamp lizard. He broke its neck and threw it to the soldiers behind him. As undead, even if we can rebuild the Skalon dynasty, will it still be the Orc dynasty of the past? It's just a kingdom of the undead. What's the difference between life and death? Whether undead or Orc, I'm still me, the shaman said. Are you Luca Monet or Luca Skalon? No one knew that there were 2 derivatives among the Dark Beastmen. Last time, Monet had created twins and implanted 2 equally powerful ancient Orc souls, but now the 2 seem to have diverged. Kaladin growled. I think you've already forgotten your previous name, but I still remember. Kaladin Skalon. If I'm not an Orc, then I'm not. Before Kaladin could finish his words, the 2 derivatives' expressions shook. They gripped their giant blades and bone staffs tightly. It actually caught up. A minute later, a meteor fell from the sky and smashed into the ground in front of everyone. Amidst the violent shockwaves and violent thuds, all the water in the marsh wetlands evaporated in 3 seconds. Several layers of the area instantly collapsed, turning into hard, dry soil. A tall humanoid monster covered in horns and bone spikes slowly stood up from the crater it had created amidst the surging smoke and water vapor. Caught you, the monster said. Your body is covered in the thick blood of the elves. Where do you think you're going? Who is Kaladin? I am. Kaladin was already at the front of the group, so he didn't need to move forward. He raised his giant blade and asked, Who are you? A demon? The monster didn't answer at all. It glanced at him and said, You can rest for as long as you want, Kaladin. You seem to be the leader of the Dark Beastmen. I'll give you a fair duel. If you win, you'll live. If you lose, you'll die, and your people will all die. Kaladin understood that the other party was repeating what he had said to the Elven King. It seemed that the Elven King was already dead, and the other party was here for revenge. However, there was only one of it, and it sounded like it had brought countless servants to surround them. Pretentious, the shaman laughed, lightning gathering in his hands. Warriors of Scaron, heed my command. Wait, Kaladin said, reaching out to stop the shaman's next move. I'll fight it. Are you crazy? The shaman shouted. We don't need to waste time at this time. You're the crazy one, Luca. Kaladin shouted back, even louder. You've already forgotten who you are. The Scaron royalty will never back down when challenged on the battlefield. Look at the warriors behind you, idiot. The shaman heard this and looked back. He found that every Dark Beast man was looking at him with their weapons pointed down. They were using silence to express their stance. Idiot! The shaman cursed and could only retreat. Kaladin, fighting in the name of Monet. Kaladin said in a serious tone. He was not stupid. If the shaman could sense the strength of the other party, so could he. However, the traditions of Skara told him that he could not cower, and he himself was not willing to cower. Caesar Tangerine, the monster said. It didn't say anything else, and hooked its claw at the dark beastman leader. Kaladin was ready, storing power, bending, running, accelerating, bending knees, jumping slash. When the dark beastman was storing power, Caesar didn't move. When the dark beastman was running, Caesar didn't move. When the dark beastman used jumping slash, Caesar didn't move. Even when the giant blade reached Caesar's head, Caesar didn't move. Hit the target. Even Kaladin didn't think that it would be so easy. He was prepared to change his move, but it seemed that it was useless now. Hitting the head and killing it. The giant blade hit Caesar's head. It hit the side of Caesar's eyes, right between the four horns on the second form's head. In the next second, the edge of the giant black blade exploded in a dazzling spark. Kaladin suffered a huge reaction force, and his arm spasmed. This incredible change didn't discourage the Beastman warrior. After landing, Kaladin turned his body and kicked the hardest and most fragile part of the humanoid's body, the knee. The spikes on his iron boots broke. Chapter 443. Kaladin let out a muffled groan as he felt the bones in his toes shatter. However, this injury was not enough to affect the orc's movements. The dark orc leader bent his knees and jumped back, putting some distance between him and the humanoid monster. From the beginning to the end, Caesar did not move a single step. He looked at the orc who attacked violently and then retreated abruptly. It was only when Kaladin reached a safe distance that he stopped and said, "Is that all you've got?" "Of course not." Kaladin raised his head proudly, as if unwilling to show weakness. He bent his back, and his muscles quickly bulged. The power of his bloodline made the orc's fangs become more restrained, and his body grew another 30 centimeters. He took a deep breath and said, "Caesar Tangerine, a powerful opponent. I will remember this name." As soon as his voice fell, he rushed forward again, his speed twice as fast as before. He bent his knees, jumped, and used the same move again. The dark beast man in the air let out a low roar, and the power of the legend rank burst out, causing a loud gust of wind to rush into their eyes. Caesar looked up at the dark orc descending from the sky. It was not until the blade was about to touch him that he stretched out his hand, or rather his claw. Clang! There was a sharp sound of metal colliding. The giant blade was caught, and a series of fierce sparks flew out from the collision between the blade and the claw. However, the orc could not move an inch. Even the dark orc who was holding the hilt of the blade was suspended in the air. "This is impossible." Kaladin stared at the claw holding the giant blade and shook his head in panic. He wasn't surprised that Caesar could block the blade, but that Caesar's face was as calm as ever when he blocked such a huge force. His arm didn't even bend, and the ground under his feet didn't show any signs of sinking. This was not in line with the orc's understanding. Kaladin's bloody hand proved that this was not a performance. Where did such a huge force go? Caesar looked at him and said, "Orc, you don't know what is impossible." The black dragon began to exert force. Cracks began to appear on the edge of the giant blade, which quickly spread. Even Kaladin himself didn't know what material the dark giant blade was made of. It was created by Monet, and it began to disintegrate. Caesar clenched his fist, and Kaladin's weapon completely exploded, scattering in all directions. The sharp fragments penetrated the tree stump and the ground, and also the dark orc's body. Kaladin, holding the hilt and returning to the ground, lowered his head and found that blood was flowing out of his abdomen. "I admit you win." Kaladin panted as he spoke. His opponent hadn't directly attacked him, but just the shockwaves and recoil from the battle had caused him to suffer multiple injuries. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. This is already Kaladin Skara's limit. Logically speaking, I've already lost. Kaladin's dark face had a trace of blood. He lowered his head in shame. But we have a mission that we must complete, so I'm sorry. As he spoke, the dark beastman's body swelled up once again. Countless muscles bulged on his body, growing into tumor-like lumps. The lumps kept growing bigger and bigger, growing longer and longer. It was as if his body was explosively multiplying, rapidly expanding to 2 times its original size, 3 times, 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. Kaladin's body had swelled to a height of 30 meters. His muscles twisted together to form layers that wrapped around his body, as if he was wearing heavy armor. The sharp fangs protruding from his mouth were thick and sharp, arching up from his cheeks like a helmet. Now, you will face Monet's outstanding creation, the Orc King. Kaladin's voice became deep and heavy. Every word he said sounded like a low growl. His tone had also changed completely, as if he had changed into a different personality. The power that belonged to Monet surged in Kaladin's body. He stretched out his hand, and the dark, giant blade appeared again in the form of a shadow. The orc raised the giant blade high, and a blade-like hurricane suddenly burst out from his body. Whoosh! The blade disappeared. Caesar stared at the so-called Orc King. Boom! The ground caved in, and the ground sank under the immense pressure. The ground of the swamp area that had been baked into hard soil by Caesar instantly caved in by almost 1 meter. Monet's energy produced an annihilating destructive power, shattering everything around Kaladin. This was the limit of power that a legendary stage expert could unleash. It could destroy everything as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The other beastmen tried their best to stabilize their bodies in the fierce wind. They looked at Kaladin's body with complicated expressions. All creatures will be punished. In the fierce wind, the giant orc panted for a while and then roared. His voice echoed throughout the area. For Quell Dorii, revenge. Is that all? A voice that had never been heard before appeared. It was low and deep. The giant orc opened his eyes wide and tried to stare at the fierce wind. He did not doubt his own power, and he even believed that this humanoid monster was dead. But it seemed that this was not the case. The other party's condition seemed to be not bad. The hurricane was torn apart, and an unimaginable giant claw reached out of the storm. It pinched the giant orc's head as fast as lightning, lifting his feet off the ground. His 30-meter-long body was completely lifted up, and then he fell back to the ground with a bang. The orcs saw the body of the giant dragon. He pressed his front claw on the head of the leader, and with an irresistible force, he pressed the giant orc's face into the ground. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not escape. He was firmly bound by the claws. The black dragon's posture was like disciplining a cub. "You disappoint me," he said. "Roar!" The giant orc roared like a beast. His already complicated voice became even more blurred because of the mud. He used his hands to support his body, and he slowly raised his head. "I'm the son of Monet, the Orc King. No one can bang." The black dragon used more strength, interrupted the orc's words, and pressed him back into the ground. His ferocious head reached out to the giant orc's ear and whispered, "I have seen a real Orc King, and he is not like you." After saying this, he twisted the giant orc's head. "Kill him." The death of the giant orc did not make the other orcs retreat. Instead, it gave the shaman the command. Under his command, the thunderstorm directly descended on the black dragon's huge body. The dark orcs all bared their teeth and charged at the black dragon, but there were only a few of them who had the bloodline status. It seemed that even during the Skalan dynasty, the orcs could not use this kind of enhanced strength. Caesar flapped his wings twice, and his 4 limbs left the ground. He looked down at the dark orcs who were not afraid of death, and took a light breath. An unparalleled light bloomed in the black dragon's mouth. It was as if there was a sun in it, and the terrifying heat caused the air to distort and the light to dislocate. When the fusion breath swept past, the mountains in the distance were immediately cut off, and the whole area was turned into a wasteland. Chapter 444. You've alerted Monet, Silver Dragon said. Caesar held a glass of Queen Feroria's wine and turned his head to look at the storm outside the window. Lightning flashed in the dark clouds, and the sky seemed to crack open. The whole Arzala area was trembling like mortals who were afraid of the punishment of God. Shockwaves kept coming. On the other side of the conference table sat several other leaders of the alliance. Their faces were obviously filled with uneasiness. Although this level of earthquake was not enough to cause substantial harm to people or objects, the implication was quite frightening. Monet was awakening and stretching out his body from the demiplane. However, the Black Dragon Emperor was still leisurely enjoying this stormy night of earthquakes, not having any mood swings because of this. "Isn't this what you want?" he said indifferently. "Yes, but before Monet woke up, we've already suffered a great loss," Silver Dragon explained. Before Monet's army attacked the defensive line, a leader of the Wolfheart clan, Karenu Burning Mane, who had sneaked into the kingdom of Abu, mysteriously disappeared. Until now, we have not found any information about him. As she spoke, she glanced at the other leaders sent by the Wolfheart clan, Hernu, the chief of the Bloodtooth tribe, who lowered his head and remained silent without any emotional fluctuations. Silver Dragon paused and continued. On the other hand, the kingdom of Taya has officially announced their withdrawal from the alliance. They suffered a great loss when they were attacked by the Dark Orcs. Now, all their troops have withdrawn from Corver to escort their sleeping king back to the Elven Forest. Can the Penishade dragons stay in Fort Corver? Caesar looked back and glanced to the left. No problem. Alex gently shook the glass and stared at the swirling blue liquid in it. A reasonable request. In addition to these, there's one more thing. Silver Dragon turned around and looked at the corner of the conference table. When Monet's main force arrived at Fort Mycad, the kingdom of Io chose not to resist and directly retreated. If it weren't for the timely arrival of the Blackwing Empire, Fort Mycad would have fallen. Once this happened, the entire alliance would be implicated. Silver Dragon looked at King Io and said, "Your Majesty Nielsen, I think everyone here needs an explanation. In the information given by the Metal Dragons, I don't see any possibility of the human army resisting the Viper Dragons. Unless the spellcasters of Butchie and Malha, as well as the elite army, are all gathered at Mycad Castle, the Io kingdom will be massacred by Monet's Viper Dragons." Nielsen stood up and glanced at the Black Emperor's back. "Also, I can't be sure if there are any spawns among the Viper Dragons. If there are, I don't think Io can hold on for long, even if they don't evacuate." Temporarily evacuating Mycad Castle was a decision I made after careful consideration. We also told the council that reinforcements would arrive as soon as the Viper Dragons appear. I don't think there will be any problems. So, in order to protect your army, you fled Mycad Castle. The Silver Dragon looked at him. Nielsen's explanation was reasonable, but it wasn't just the Ajo kingdom that was fighting in the Abu region. Once the strategic location of Fort Mycad fell, the entire defense line on the battlefield would collapse like a dam bursting. Nielsen's explanation was reasonable, but it couldn't convince the other leaders. "Yes, perhaps in your eyes, I've made a mistake," Nielsen said softly. "I'm willing to discuss compensation with you after the war, but if I were given a chance to do it all over again, I would still make the same choice. Io's army is not equal to the Viper Dragons. If we fight, we will suffer heavy losses. In my opinion, this is a completely useless sacrifice. Also, I believe that the Blackwing Empire's army will arrive in time." After he finished speaking, he glanced at the Black Emperor again. Alex pursed her lips disapprovingly, and the Metal Dragons fell into a long silence. After these words, they couldn't carry out their duties to Nielsen because cherishing every life was also King Bahamut's doctrine, and the devout believers couldn't go against their god. In the following days, the Blackwing Empire will be stationed at Mycad Castle, and the Io Kingdom's army will be stationed elsewhere. After a moment of silence, Caesar suddenly spoke. After he finished speaking, he turned around, pushed open the door, and walked into the heavy rain. The rest of the people discussed for a while and felt that this should be the best choice. Declan Castle was brightly lit. The constant light source created by the illumination spell was fearless of the thunder and lightning in the sky, and it did its best to radiate light and heat. Caesar walked aimlessly to a secluded place and crushed a communication crystal. A ferocious wolf's face appeared in the drifting light. When Caesar saw it, it obviously saw the scene here as well. The owner of the wolf's face slowly took a few steps back, revealing its entire body. "Your Majesty." Hogg bowed, and a hint of surprise flashed through his red eyes when he saw Caesar's second form. But he didn't ask anything. He understood the Black Dragon Emperor's straightforward nature and said directly, "I think there might be some problems here." "Luna?" Caesar subconsciously thought of the little girl. "The queen is fine," Hogg said in a low voice. "It's Blackrock Mountain." "Aslier's?" "Yes." Hogg's face was very serious. The Knolls had never bothered the Black Dragon for trivial matters. As long as he found something, it was a more serious problem. The magma of Blackrock Mountain has become active recently, and some demons are gradually climbing to the surface and spreading out. Although there is no conflict with the Blackwing clan, they are constantly trying to break the Empire's blockade. The radiation dragons are very uneasy. According to the observation of Monitor Cadeaux, there is a powerful force brewing below Blackrock Mountain. After discussion, we guess that the Lord of the Abyss is awakening. Aslier's somehow learned that you left the North and wants to use this opportunity to break free from the Empire's shackles. Ever since the previous armistice, the Flame Demon Overlord had not done any evil and had always behaved very well. He used Black Rock Mountain as his lair, hibernating in the deepest depths of the earth, his reputation gradually fading away. Over the years, the reputation of the Lord of the Infernal Prison, Aslier's, gradually faded. However, Blackrock Mountain, where demons were active, became a paradise for adventurers to explore and develop. But a demon lord was a demon lord after all. The Lord of the Infernal Prison was always looking for an opportunity to vent his desire for destruction. Although half of the Blackwing Empire's top forces were stationed in Blackrock Mountain to guard it, Aslier saw it as a small problem. The only one he was really afraid of was the Black Dragon Emperor. The other party had power that was not weaker than a demon lord. Even after so many years of adapting to the rules of the material plane and improving his strength, the Infernal King still did not have the confidence to win. However, when the Black Dragon Emperor left, the Lord of the Abyss hidden in the depths of the Northern Empire was not so well behaved. The energy fluctuations were getting more and more active. Hogg judged that the other party would come out of Blackrock Mountain in the near future. The Blackwing Empire had entered an emergency state of preparation. "The rain is really heavy." Caesar looked up at the heavy sky and said. He let Hogg stop the state of preparation. Chapter 445. It was not difficult for the Black Dragon Emperor to travel back and forth between the North and Ersala. Although he could not use teleportation spells or teleportation circles, the fusion furnace was enough to propel the Black Dragon through the sky like a supersonic fighter from another world. In just 2 hours, he had already swept past the Firmrock Fortress at the border of the Empire. Black Rock Mountain. This was a region born from the corpses of the Theran Desert. As it had not been baptized by the sands of time, the terrain of the Black Rock Mountain was rather steep. The ridges pierced the skies like blades, while the surface was frail and full of cracks, with flames flashing past from time to time. The environment here was harsh, and the temperature was unpredictable. No creature in the prime material realm would want to settle here, and the rich negative energy baptized the land at all times, turning it into a terrifying abyssal residence. The inferno seemed to have no end, and the scenery remained the same. Caesar stopped in his tracks, speaking to the bubbling magma in front of him. "My time is precious. Do you want to be demolished?" "Aslier's." The magma responded with a rumbling sound, and the ground began to tremble. The sound turned from a muffled rumble to a near explosion, and the magma was dispersed by an invisible force, revealing a deep tunnel buried beneath the rock. Caesar had obtained the privilege that did not belong to adventurers. He walked through the tunnel and went straight underground. He stepped into the flame palace that was built by the demons. When he raised his head, he saw the surging flames. The Inferno King was holding his head proudly, looking down at him. The black dragon stared at the Abyssal Lord. Its body was in a semi-elemental state that was a headache for all creatures in the material realm. Asliers sat on the throne, looking down from above. The Balrog King's upper body was an armor made of his beloved molten core that wrapped around his solid heart. His shoulders and chest were full of small, sharp barbs, while his lower body was entirely made of flames, containing powerful demonic power. Black Dragon, you dare trespass into my domain. The Lord of the Infernal Prison's voice rumbled throughout the palace. Is our agreement voided? Are you planning to start a war with a noble being from the upper realm? Not at the moment, but I think if I don't come to see your friend, I think it will be soon. Caesar shook his head at first. After a pause, he let out a low chuckle. TSK, noble creature from the upper realm. Demons really know how to describe themselves. Asliers looked at the black dragon. You didn't come here just to see your old friend, did you? Let me guess, you want to observe my power? Disappointed, aren't you? He said. After coming to the prime material plane, not only did I not weaken, I became even stronger and healthier. Isn't that obvious? It's 100 times easier to absorb the energy here than in the abyss. It's like a delicious meal for me. But what I didn't expect was that you've also become stronger, just like me. This is absolutely impossible for the dragons of the main material plane. Stepping into the supernatural is already their limit. The stupid and incompetent big lizards will never be able to touch the threshold of demigod in their lifetime. They can only tremble in front of the strongest beings from the upper realm. Asliers was very talkative. Siren, what is it? Caesar asked. He remembered the last time the Lord of the Infernal Prison called his name by mistake. The panic tone and expression were still fresh in his memory. Hundreds of inextinguishable flames in the hall suddenly rose a lot higher. The flames in Asliers' eyes flashed, as if the name reminded him of something bad. The Lord of the Infernal Prison became serious and pulled back his scattered thoughts. Back to the topic, Black Dragon, what do you want to do by trespassing into my domain? Pretending not to understand? Caesar tilted his head and asked, Didn't you choose to wake up because you knew that I left the north? Let's be frank, Monet. Asliers calmed his mind and waited for the next words. Monet is the ultimate creation of Quell Dorii. He went crazy after the extinction of Quell Dorii. He will kill all creatures in his sight, including demons, Caesar said. What does it have to do with me? It didn't, but my family told me that the Black Rock Mountain is not very peaceful, so I came back to prevent future troubles. Now you have two choices. Either we fight and whoever loses dies, or you come with me to Ersala to deal with Monet. Caesar said bluntly, completely ignoring the bailers around him. He only had the Lord of the Infernal Prison in his eyes. Roar. Asliers looked up and laughed loudly. For thousands of years, no one has ever talked to me like this. You dare to talk to a great being from the upper realm. He paused and looked at Black Dragon's unchanged face. His tone suddenly changed. Well, I admit that you have such qualifications. Black Dragon, if I leave my territory and go to Ersala, what can I get? Divine Fire, are you interested? Caesar looked at him. What? You said Divine Fire? The Infernal Lord almost doubted that he had heard wrong. His mood swings suddenly became strong. He left the throne and floated close to Black Dragon. Monet is a god? You seem a little scared. Caesar said. Of course it is not a god, but Quell Dorii combined a divine fire in order to fight against the dragon god and the dragon queen and implanted it in their ultimate creation, giving Monet the power of a god. Created divine fire? Asliers thought for a while. This race is quite powerful. In the bottomless abyss, those stronger than me can also design virtual divinity. It sounds like their method is the same. 10,000 years ago, when I first stepped into Iradia, even the arrogant Quell Dorii had to call me king. Caesar said in a grand and majestic tone, then returned to normal. You don't know this race? Quell Dorii's final battle was 7,000 years ago. 3,000 years is enough for this race to develop into something I can't predict. Asliers calmly explained. Leaving the Black Rock Mountain is a great risk for me. I still need to make a lot of preparations. So, Black Dragon, if you succeed in killing Monet, all the divine fire will be mine. The Metal Dragons, the Penishade Dragons, and the Blackwing Empire will all participate in this battle. You don't need to do anything. You just need to go to Aersala with me. The divine fire is not for free. You can only get a small part of it, Caesar said. The Metal Dragons, the Penishade Dragons, and the Blackwing Empire, TSK. Asliers said, according to what you said, something like Monet can only be dealt with by a demigod. Those below the legend rank are not even qualified to participate in the battle. How many legends can you bring out? What can they do other than clean up the minions? Also, Black Dragon, other than the few children born by God Io, I haven't heard of any dragon who could become a true god after that. The strength of dragons comes from themselves, not from the divine fire and divine title. You don't need something like the divine fire at all. The Infernal Lord said sincerely, leave it to me. I can do some experiments that I like. As a reward, not only will I help you deal with Monet this time, you will also have the alliance of the upper world creatures in the future. In the future, when you have a conflict with Iradia and other forces, I will stand by your side. The price is just a divine fire that you don't need. How about it? It sounded quite good, but the Black Dragon shook his head firmly. No, you can only get half of it at most. That's the bottom line. If things were successful, he could give Asliers the divine fire, but even if Caesar really didn't need it, half of it would be in his hands. He couldn't give it all to the Lord of the Infernal Prison. That might cause more trouble. Chapter 446. In the great hall of Castle Declan, a huge ball of light was hanging high up in the sky. The burning charcoal around it also warmed up the heavy and oppressive castle. Gold Dragon Stannis was in his human form. He sat on a chair and focused on the latest battle report. The Metal Dragon leader, who looked like a monster hunter, had an ugly expression on his face. Obviously, the news in the report was not something to be happy about. After Monet woke up, he quickly fell into a deep slumber again. However, his army has already gathered at the Elk Hills. It is obvious that he does not intend to let us continue to enter the hinterland of the EBS. Stannis handed the report to the Silver Dragon beside him. The Silver Dragon reached out and took the report. Inicorn, in the long history of the Hesperot family, if you were to encounter such a situation, what would you do? Stannis used his strong arm to support his chin and asked in a low voice, would we cross the defensive line and attack, or continue to wait for the right opportunity? Inicorn Hesperot did not answer immediately. She carefully read the report in her hand twice and then thought for a few minutes. She then said to the current leader of the Metal Dragons, every day we wait, Monet will gather more monster soldiers at the front line. If we attack now, we will definitely suffer great losses and even suffer an irreversible defeat. However, even if it is so dangerous, the Alliance still has a reason to attack. Monet will create a new spawn every 3 days. We cannot let it continue to grow. So, I think, the Silver Dragon paused and said, avoid large-scale battles as much as possible. At the same time, carry out continuous high-intensity small-scale attacks on Monet's spawn. This is the wisest choice. High-intensity, small-scale attacks. Stannis thought for a while and asked, why do you think so? Because of the consumption. Inicorn said in a low voice, the energy of the astral plane circulates. Whether it is beasts, monsters, elementals, undead, or even powerful gods, they still need various forms of energy to replenish themselves. In this regard, the Alliance has the financial aid of the trading cities, the logistical support of the river region, and the military support of the northern countries. Therefore, our power is endless. However, Monet did not. Although he had powerful derivatives, armies, and territories, he was still fighting alone. After carefully observing the previous battles, we discovered that the number of snake-scorpion beasts was rapidly decreasing. Other than the portion that died as cannon fodder, I guess that a large portion of the snake-scorpion beasts were used as food by Monet's army. She continued, "Of course, Monet can continue to create armies tirelessly, but the greater the number of armies, the greater the consumption. He sucked the bones and blood of the kingdom of EBS to create those ugly monsters, but the bones and blood of EBS are not infinite. Next, as long as we lock down this line of defense, Monet's minions will wither quickly because of the lack of replenishment. Of course, a simple standoff and defense is not advisable, because apart from the army, Monet can also create derivatives. This is the real problem for the Alliance, and also the reason why I suggested that we have to carry out continuous, high-intensity, small-scale attacks. Monet wants to gather enough derivatives before starting the final battle. Of course, we can't let him do as he wishes. The key problem is that the Alliance needs to constantly send elite forces to hunt down the derivatives. Even if Monet has the power of the gods to revive them, he will continue to grow weaker. Good analysis, Inicorn. As expected of the Pearl of Hespero. Stannis expressed dissatisfaction, then asked, "But how can we guarantee that we will find the derivatives?" "We don't need to deliberately search for the derivatives," Inicorn said. Inigorn said, just as the battle reports said, "The enemy has gathered all their troops in the Elk Hills." I guess after Monet woke up, he gave his troops a new order: block off our attack route to the kingdom of EBS. In this situation, we only need to continuously send small groups of powerful forces to attack and then retreat. Sooner or later, the derivatives will not be able to bear it and will come out to stop us. After hearing this, the Golden Dragon thought for a moment, then said in a low voice, "But there is one thing we need to be wary of. We have to keep an eye on Monet's movements. If he suddenly changes his strategy and leaves the demiplane to launch an attack, it will definitely cause a disaster. Even if the Dragon God and the Dragon Queen's apostles descend, they may not be able to stop him. Emperor Caesar has already returned to the north yesterday. The date of his return is unknown." "I understand. It will be fine as long as we don't provoke Monet. We have to do our best to control the tempo and slowly wear down his power." Inicorn nodded, then asked, "Speaking of Emperor Caesar, he suddenly left without leaving any message. What is the situation with Castle Mycid, where the Blackwing army is stationed?" "I thought that the Blackwing army would be in chaos without Caesar Tangerine suppression." Stannis revealed an indescribable expression, but in reality, what we see is Mycid Castle is in order. The Blackwing army is silent, sharpening their swords. This army does not fear the giant dragons. Even if it is me, they are still very hostile. This army is very strong. They have repelled Monet's Viper Dragon. Moreover, that huge empire does not only have this army. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Until now, I still have not seen the shadow of the radiation dragon that the giant dragons were talking about. Stannis sighed, then said, "The current Blackwing Empire has truly become a power that can control the entire Iradia. Caesar Orderonzo Tangerine. When this war is over, everyone will call him the King of the North." "What is there to sigh about?" Inicorn said, "At least he is a dragon. His descendants will also be dragons. A kingdom ruled by dragons is undoubtedly a good thing for the giant dragons. No matter who the ruler is, even if Caesar Tangerine is a chromatic dragon, he shares a common ancestor with us. I intend to go to the Blackwing Empire with a few friends after the war is over." "You want to live in a kingdom ruled by evil dragons?" Stannis asked her, his eyes flashing with a trace of dissatisfaction. "I said before, no matter who the ruler is." The Silver Dragon said, "The Blackwing Empire is not a chaotic hell. On the contrary, my human friend told me that monsters and humans can live in harmony there. The laws of the Empire are strict, fair, and orderly." He exaggerated and said that the place is comparable to the kingdom of God to ordinary people. Many silver dragons want to go and take a look. All right, Stannis said. Let's get down to business first. We need to gather the other leaders for a meeting and rearrange our strategy. At the same time, we need to wait for Emperor Caesar to return. Chapter 447. 3 days later, the Black Dragon received an urgent message from Stannis. Your Majesty Tangerine, if possible, please return as soon as possible. This was the first thing the Golden Dragon said. His face was covered in a layer of gloom, and his originally bright eyes were dim. Even his voice was weak. What's the matter? Caesar raised his eyebrows. It wasn't that he wasn't sad about what happened to Asliers, but that the Black Dragon and the Flame King had just reached an agreement. Asliers was a chaotic and evil lord of the Abyss, and most of the people on his side were mentally ill people who would do anything if their brains went haywire. It was quite troublesome to cooperate with them, and he had to constantly worry about them losing control and betraying him. Whether it was the astral plane or the Iradia, when both sides were equal in power, very few creatures would choose to deal with chaotic and evil. However, this time, Caesar intended to facilitate this deal. Apart from wanting to bring Asliers away from the Northlands to stabilize his base, he also wanted to borrow Asliers' power. From the information he obtained from various sources, Monet's power was close to that of a god. Caesar wasn't sure if he could resist that thing, so it wasn't a bad thing to have a few more helpers. After the deal was done, they would each take half of the Godfire. After several rounds of bargaining, the Flame King finally agreed to this condition. He then said that he needed some time to prepare before heading to the outside world, and asked the Black Dragon to wait for him for a few days. Caesar agreed. The two sides didn't sign any contract, because it was difficult to find a suitable god. Asliers suggested that the witness be one of the 3 Abyss Pillar gods, Graz-Zt, the Lord of the Dark Cloud. Caesar naturally didn't agree. Graz-Zt was his direct superior, and it was easy for him to change his mind. Having the Lord of the Dark Cloud, Graz-Zt, become a witness was a terrible idea. But what was even worse was that the Black Dragon didn't have a single god to choose from. Not only was his mortal enemy Tiamat out of consideration, the only 2 gods that Black Dragon had a relatively friendly relationship with were the moon god Serene and the platinum dragon god Bahamut. And these 2 gods of the good faction definitely wouldn't become witnesses to the contract between a demon and an evil dragon. In the end, the alliance between the 2 sides was still just a verbal agreement. It could only be a verbal agreement, with each side's strength as a guarantee. Caesar really wanted to complete this deal with the Flame Monarch, but if Asliers suddenly lost control and wanted to screw him over, he also had a backup plan. In the end, it was still unknown who would be screwed over in the end. Everything was progressing well, but what Caesar did not expect was that Azara would send him a message so quickly. Gold Dragon Stannis spoke first, and the news he gave was shocking. The leader of the Penishade Dragons, Tyrant Alex, disappeared yesterday. Missing? Caesar shook his head. That's right. Stannis nodded with a serious expression. 3 days ago, we renegotiated a new strategic plan, which is to launch a small-scale, high-intensity attack on Monet's army with the purpose of cleaning out the spawns. Inagorn should have told you about this in detail. Seeing Caesar nod, Stannis continued. After you left, the blue dragon Zudai became the most powerful in the Alliance. After some discussion, the Alliance decided to send her to carry out the first strike, and Alex herself agreed. Her target was Cowie Hill in the Elk Mountains. At the time, we guessed that the place was most likely where the Hydra Monet was hiding. Zudai Long led 3 red dragons and 5 blue dragons and set off yesterday morning, arriving at Cowie Hill at 9:03. 12 minutes later, they were attacked by the Viper Dragons. At 9:41, Alex informed the Alliance that the Viper Dragons stationed at that place were all killed, and there were no sightings of the Hydra or any other active spawns. That was the last message, Stannis said quickly. Stannis spoke very quickly. Since then, we have been unable to establish any form of communication with her. After saying this, it meant that apart from Alex, None of the 3 red dragon and 5 blue dragons she brought with her had returned to the Alliance. Again, Caesar said. Previously, Corona Burning Mane of the Wolfheart clan had also mysteriously disappeared. Although the black dragon did not seem to care, he still secretly remembered this matter. According to the Blackwing Empire's long-term investigation report of the Wolfheart clan, Corona Burning Mane was a rather astute and cautious leader. He himself was not weak and had been the Burning Mane chieftain for 10 years, so he was very experienced. The fox and wolf leaders did not have the sense of honor of taking the lead like human kings. When faced with an undefeatable danger, the first thing they would do was to protect themselves, abandon the clan, and flee. Ordinary people would also do their best to buy time for their leader. But even so, not a single one of the 3,000 fox and wolf leaders who had gone to explore the interior of the EBS kingdom had returned. Caesar subconsciously linked the 2 disappearances together, but he quickly realized that they were 2 completely different things. The difference between Alex and the Burning Mane chieftain was like heaven and earth. She was the ancestor of the true dragons and the strongest of the current Iradia Penachet dragons. Many years ago, she was able to defeat the ancient golden dragon Stannis. After a round of growth hibernation, she had become even more powerful. She was only 1 step behind Caesar, this abnormal dragon. As long as Alex did not want to fight to the death, even if all of Monet's derivatives appear to stop her, they might not be able to make her stay. Could it be the Dragon Queen? Caesar's thoughts jumped. He knew Tiamat's nature very well. The Dragon Queen was the mother of evil dragons and also the dragon of conspiracy. Who knew if she was brewing a new trap? Stannis raised his head and looked at Caesar. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be." It was obvious that the metal dragons had similar suspicions as well. The evil dragon mother's reputation was well known, and she was the mortal enemy of both the metal dragons and the mutated dragons. She had only joined this cooperation because of Monet's pressure on the main material plane, so it was inevitable that she would have other thoughts. But in the end, the doubts were dispelled. Although the situation was white-hot, it was still not clear. It was not the time for the final battle yet. Even if Tiamat had a conspiracy, she would still make trouble at that time. Now, with such a sudden arrangement, other than letting Alex hide and not do anything, the Dragon Queen would not gain any benefits. The evil Dragon Queen loved to talk about benefits. She would not do such a thing. "Have you seen the back of Cowie Hill?" Caesar asked. Yes, it was full of thunder and fire. It was scorched by the blue dragon and the red dragon, just like what Alex said in her last message, Stannis said. But there is one detail. The space in that area, how should I put it, is very new and not very stable, as if it had been forcefully torn apart before. In that case, your information is wrong. Caesar was silent for a moment. He moved his huge body and paced around the edge of the sea of flowers in front of the Blackwing court. After a while, he came up with a conjecture. Monet is still active. He did not immediately reproduce his derivatives. He created the illusion that he was in a deep sleep to lure you into the trap. The so-called high-intensity, small-scale attack strategy is exactly what he wanted. Alex is the fish that took the bait. She thought to this extent. Stannis's face flashed with a hint of fear. The crystallization of the wisdom of a civilization. "What do you think?" Caesar asked. With Alex's power, only Monet can control and kill her before she sends our message. "Indeed," Stannis said. "When can you return?" Stannis asked. "When can you return? What's wrong?" The Golden Dragon sighed and said honestly, "Monet is a great threat to Iradia. In order to control the development of the situation and eliminate the disaster, King Bahamut is prepared to temporarily send a divine spark to the mortal realm to deal with this monster. There is no need for the Platinum Dragon God to do it himself." Caesar's expression changed. He quickly changed his casual tone and said comfortingly, "Our alliance is still in effect. The Blackwing Empire will help you deal with Monet. I will return to Arzalis soon. Don't worry." He did not doubt the Platinum Dragon God's ability at all. Even a useless apostle like Mailer could become incomparably ferocious with the support of a shard of divinity. What did it mean for the platinum dragon god to use an ancient golden dragon apostle to descend and support it with all the shards of divinity? He could almost make Stannis a new god in that period of time, a god of the prime material plane. Actually, Tiamat could also use this method to come in and deal with the mutated black dragon, but the Dragon Queen would not do so. This was because there was a great risk involved. A god who had lost his divinity would lose the power to resist external threats during this period of time. Once the god's kingdom was invaded, a god without divinity would be equivalent to a puppet at the mercy of others. That was why it was better to offend an evil god than a good god. An evil god would do anything, and it was terrifying. However, a good god not only had many friends, but was also willing to risk his life. If this method was used to deal with Monet, Caesar would definitely not be able to touch the divine spark. This was not the result he wanted. Chapter 448. Caesar. Is Her Majesty Wind Whisper all right? The black dragon cut off the communication and turned around. He saw Luna wrapped in a blanket, flapping her little wings and floating behind him. I heard that she's in critical condition. The queen of the Taya kingdom had faked her death and returned to the elven forest. Such news naturally couldn't be hidden from the outside world. Many intelligent races had related rumors and discussions about it. As the queen of the Northern Empire, Luna naturally didn't have to face the problem of lacking information. Even if Caesar didn't take the initiative to mention this to her, Luna still received some groundless news from other channels. The black dragon shrunk his huge body and looked at Luna at the same level. He said gently, Jaisha was indeed attacked and injured in the Battle of Yulsala. She did fall into a deep sleep, but her injuries are not as serious as the rumors say. Yggdrasil of Taya Kingdom is a part of the World Tree. When it returns, it can heal the Elven Queen's injuries. I want to see her, Luna said tentatively. In the little girl's heart, Jaisha was a gentle and kind queen, and also her friend. Hearing that Jaisha was forced into a deep sleep, Luna quickly thought of visiting the Elven Forest. Now, Caesar smiled and looked at her. There are no teleportation circles in the Elven Kingdom. If we depart now, you sleepy girl will fall asleep again before we reach the Empire's borders. Hearing this, Luna's eyebrows furrowed into a ball. She unwillingly touched her stomach. Seems like it, she said. The little fellow now slept for nearly 16 hours a day. She spent very little time awake and felt tired very easily. Don't worry, Jaisha will be fine, but you have to take care of your own body. Caesar said, I've already visited her on my way back. You need to rest more now. Oh, your parents should be moving to the Empire in a few days. Luna hesitated. All right, she said, then I'll go back and rest. The little girl yawned as soon as she said this. Yes, kiss kiss. The moon rose from this side of the mountain, and the sun set from the other side of the mountain. After a while, Caesar finally followed Luna back to the room, coaxing her to sleep before leaving the Blackwing Palace. He headed to the Theron Gobi and Black Rock Mountain in the north of the Empire. The rainy season in the north had just ended, but there was not a single trace of moisture in the Black Rock Mountain. The place was filled with flames and lava. Even the most experienced adventurers would not be able to identify a completely safe place to stay. With the awakening of the Lord of the Infernal Prison, the Black Rock Mountain seemed to have been reborn. Countless demons crawled out of the ground and moved about on the scorched earth, fighting each other fiercely. Without needing to speak, the scorched earth guard welcomed Black Dragon and led him into the depths of the Black Rock Mountain, the place where he last saw Asliers. In just 3 days, the infernal palace where Asliers lived had been completely changed. It had been demolished, and the place had become the source of the lava river under the Black Rock Mountain. Broken walls flowed down the river. The wider the river, the more barren it was. The glaring fire in the distance burned even more. Looking into the distance, he saw an endless wall of fire connected to the ground. The Baylor with a weapon moved forward silently, and entered the other side of the wall of fire. Are you planning to move? Asliers. Caesar's tone was half puzzled and half teasing. I've already told you that leaving the Black Rock Mountain to go to other areas of Iradia is a great risk. Not only do I need to be on guard against you, but there are also many idiots who covet my power and the gods. The lord of the infernal prison did not appear. His voice rumbled in the ground, and there was no disrespect in his words. Do you need that long? Caesar said. The Platinum Dragon God is going to descend to kill Monet personally. If we don't go to Air Sala, we won't even be able to drink the soup. Wait a moment, it will be done soon. Aslier spoke very quickly. It seemed that he was indeed in a hurry. I have to take back the power that I have spread in this place temporarily. By the way, speaking of the Platinum Dragon God, I have heard of the relationship between the giant dragons and Quel'Dorii. The Dragon Queen should also be paying attention to the battlefield, right? When you see Monet, don't expect me to kill him immediately. Let those guys go first. Demons were the mortal enemies of all gods. Neither the Dragon God nor the Dragon Queen could smile at the Lord of the Abyss. Asliers was worried that he would be attacked by the gods, and at the same time, he was also on guard against the Black Dragon. I know, Caesar agreed. He did not want to kill him immediately. After all, there was the existence of the evil Dragon Mother in the alliance. He could not let his guard down at any time. The demons and the evil dragons were jackals of the same tribe. After Black Dragon's words, there was a long silence. The magma rose and disappeared. The Baylor demons did not look sideways. They silently poured into the wall of fire, one after another. Time continued to elapse silently. I have no patience. After a long time, Caesar said, Asliers, you made me wait for nearly an hour. Are you not going to say anything? Okay. A response came from the hollow ground. The heavy and thick voice of the Flame Monarch came into their ears. Everything is ready. Black Dragon, let's go. Take me to see the incompetent and weak so-called alliance. As a Lord of the Abyss, do you plan to appear in the world above ground openly? Of course we need to disguise ourselves. Asliers' voice was full of dissatisfaction. No one knew what annoyed him. Idiot, I am right in front of you. Waves of fiery noise surged out. Except for the flames, everything was melted and evaporated. Even the soil and minerals in the magma were wiped out. But as the voice of the Lord of the infernal prison fell, the endless wall of fire in front of them quickly squeezed to both sides. It was as if it was split into two by something, revealing the dry and hard ground in the middle. The exaggeratedly shaped burning blade stood quietly on the stone platform covered with carvings. Only half of the blade was exposed. It was quiet, as if it was the only one in the universe. You turned yourself into an ornament, Caesar commented. Such a shape looked frightening, but it was not lethal. The decorative meaning was far greater than the actual effect. The burning blade had a huge blade that expanded from the tip upwards. The blade was full of magic patterns and was surrounded by flames. It had a double-edged blade. The ridge and the blade were the same width. There was a molten core inlaid in the center of the blade. You can remember this for the rest of your life. The sword rumbled with anger. No one can have the honor of using a lord of the upper world as a weapon. Is that so? Caesar smiled. It seemed to make sense. So he no longer mocked Asliers. He changed to the second form and walked to the burning blade. He held it and pulled it out. The sound of burning flames covered everything. The light and air were distorted as if they were struggling under torture. Their nostrils were filled with burning ashes of various substances. Their senses were almost useless. The Black Rock Mountain shook violently as if it was about to explode. The next moment it did explode. The aura of panic spread far and wide. Let's go. Chapter 449. As the sun set in the west, the first snowflakes fell from the sky. By dusk, the snowstorm had formed a huge white curtain, and the moon was shrouded behind it, disappearing without a trace. Monet has angered the gods, causing them to send down a calamity. This is a sign of divine retribution. At night, the captain was giving a speech to the rest of the team. Snow was a rare thing in the northern part of Iradia, and in the eyes of the people here, it was an ominous thing. Something from 7,000 years ago should have turned to dust with time. The gods will eventually grant it death. His men nodded in agreement, their fists pounding on the long wooden table. Although Fort Broken Mountain was dilapidated, the bonfires burning everywhere were enough to shelter them from the snowstorm. They had stored enough food, and when they were not on sentry duty, there was a warm fire to dry their cold and damp leather armor. They could even lie down and sleep comfortably. Compared to the fearsome Fort Miked, Fort Broken Mountain was not inferior to the serene and beautiful kingdom of God. Iogwo was marginalized. Following the Blackwing Empire's takeover of Fort Miked, they were transferred to the deserted Wagri Broken Mountain. However, this was good news for Iogwo, who was not strong enough. Although Wagri Broken Mountain was also within the Alliance's defensive line, it was the most unlikely place to be attacked. The deep cliffs were like scars on Mother Earth, preventing all land creatures from climbing over, forming a natural barrier. Iogwo only needed to set up a spell imprint to keep an eye on the things above them. This was no doubt a simple task. Everyone thought so, but Nielsen did not think so. The cautious Eagle King had just finished inspecting the sentry posts and defenses of the Broken Mountain Fortress and confirmed that everything was fine, but he still felt uneasy. As a native of Ersala, Nielsen had never seen such heavy snow. The long night was slow. Footsteps in the darkness slipped through his fingers unconsciously. The laughter of the soldiers in the camp gradually faded away. The night was quiet, as if a kingdom was being watched by a giant beast. Nielsen stared at the burning bonfire under the fireplace and sat there, lost in thought. Blood and fire flashed through his mind anxiously as he recalled and imagined. He felt as if ants were crawling over his heart. Damn it, what was it that was causing trouble? He stood up and poured himself a glass of wine. He drank it under the dim candlelight. The taste on his tongue was sweet and comforting. He told himself that he would be fine, but the uneasiness in his body grew stronger and stronger. He stared at the candle for a long time. Then, he put down the cup and placed his palm above the flame. He lowered it bit by bit until the flame burned his skin. Nelson immediately withdrew his hand and groaned in pain. "Is something the matter? Your Majesty." The king's guard outside the room whispered, "I heard you pacing on the floor." "No," Nielsen said. He grasped the hilt of the sword at his waist, relying on the weapon to give himself a sense of security. His intuition had always been accurate. When he was 17 years old, his younger brother invited him to the Norn Kingdom to play. Before they left, Nielsen suddenly became inexplicably anxious. It was only later that he found out that his brother had planned a murder. After they were ambushed, his royal guards all died in order to protect him. Nielsen himself was also pierced through the right chest by a hidden blade. In the end, he tried his best to return to the capital of Io and barely survived with the help of the court priests. That was the first time he felt such a strong sense of danger. His heart trembled, and his liver and gallbladder were cold. This was the second time. The sharp cry of an owl pierced the silence of the night. The owl sound in the Arzala region was very special. It was sharp and short, like a sharp knife. Nielsen used to hear it often in the wild. However, the Broken Mountain Fortress was surrounded by magic marks that attacked foreign creatures. How could the owl fly over the fortress? Nielsen, who was nervous, stood up. "Tell everyone to stay alert and listen to my orders, Bricker." He quickly walked out of the room and said to his guards, "I'm afraid we're in trouble." The guards did not hesitate or question. They hurried to carry out the king's order. Just half a minute later, Nielsen's words were confirmed. The sentry guards issued a hysterical warning that the Broken Mountain Fortress was under attack. The first sentry post was located in a shelter on the side of the high cliff of the Broken Mountain. In front of it was the bottomless abyss, but the guards issued an emergency report of an enemy attack. Looking down from above, there were countless ferocious golden eyes. Just one look was enough to make one's scalp tingle and tremble. They climbed silently along the smooth, weathered rock wall. Viper dragons again. Gods, Nielsen looked down at the rapidly approaching monsters and could not help but lament in his heart. He tried to find some words to describe his feelings, but it was in vain. Fear was like an indigestible meal, turning upside down in his stomach and making him want to vomit. "Your Majesty," his commander said carefully, "I've already asked the spellcasters to ask for help from the Alliance. Should we retreat?" Everyone knew that Io's army did not have the ability to confront Monet's main force head-on. Before they were supported by the Blackwing Empire, Io was the weakest country in the Arzala region. It was because of this that they had the opportunity to gain the favor of the Blackwing Empire. This was completely in line with the Iron Law of Power. Puppets had to be weak to be obedient, and overly powerful weapons could bite their masters. The commander meant that since it had already happened once, it did not matter if there was a second time. After all, no one would have thought that Broken Mountain Fortress would be attacked by Monet's main force. Unexpectedly, Nielsen Charlie clenched the hilt of his sword and slowly shook his head. "No, the situation is different this time. We have to fight," he said. "Behind Mycad Castle is the foothills and swamps. Even if the Blackwing Empire did not arrive, and we were forced to abandon Mycad Castle, Monet's army could only harass the neighboring castle at most. They could not attack other places at lightning speed. But it's different here. Behind Broken Mountain Fortress is an endless plateau. Once this place is lost, these Viper Dragons can even abandon the Alliance's defense line and directly rush into our logistics area or even Io's territory." As he spoke, his voice gradually became louder, as if he was influenced by his own words. His voice echoed at the edge of the abyss. No one thought that Monet would attack Broken Mountain Fortress because it was a wrong decision. "Look at this," he looked around. "There is no better place to defend than here. Soldiers, let's show Monet how wrong he was. Let's give these monsters a head-on blow. The gods bless us, connect us to each of our minds, and keep us united. Please remember, the country is right behind us. Reinforcements will arrive soon. Eagles of Io, follow me and hold the line." According to the investigation of the Blackwing Empire's intelligence department, Nielsen Charlie was a weak and greedy king. Such people were the easiest to control. But in reality, even the most cowardly and incompetent king had a lion in his heart. When the bottom line was crossed, the lion would awaken. Nielsen pulled out his sword, pointed it forward, and shouted, "For Azara!" Swords swarmed like a tide. For Azara. On the 23rd day of the Third Era of Iradia, 1670, Io's army was attacked at Broken Mountain Fortress. Including King Nielsen Charlie, Commander Cassar Bliss, Archmages Villanville and Brock, 10,000 soldiers tried their best to defend. Broken Mountain Fortress stood firm under the attack of the Viper Dragons. When the Metal Dragon's reinforcements arrived, the 10,000 soldiers were only left with 214 people. After defeating the monsters, the dragons found the remains of King Nielsen of Io, as well as other commanders and lords. Chapter 450. The Black Dragon was not in a hurry to return to Mycad Castle, as he was more confident in the Empire's army. Apart from the Dragonborn Flying Dragon Legion and the Goblin Armored Legion, there was also the Orc Cavalry Legion stationed in Mycad Castle. There were a total of 3 main forces, the strongest fighting force in the military alliance. Unless Monet staked everything on Mycad Castle, there was no risk of the castle falling. Ever since the last time they clashed with the Blackwing Empire's tank army, no matter if it was Monet's army or Monet's spawns, none of them would recklessly attack the Blackwing Empire's base. These guys were not stupid. They knew that they had to pick the weakest persimmon. Their strategic plan was to take advantage of the weak points in the military alliance of Arsala and attack them relentlessly. The destruction of Io's army was not a coincidence. They were Monet's targets. It was worth mentioning that in the Blackwing Empire's strategic deployment, the Orc Cavalry Legion was rarely sent to the front lines. Because of what happened when they were young, Caesar cared a lot about the orcs and rarely asked them to participate in wars and shed blood. However, Great Chief Gaul realized that this was actually a form of spoiling. The orcs were a race that valued strength above all else, not delicate flowers watered in a greenhouse. Gaul found that a comfortable and peaceful environment would only make his people weaker and more decadent. The orcs needed to be constantly forged in war to be able to regain their former glory. The orc population had a high reproductive rate and a fast maturation rate. After 20 to 30 years of absorption, integration, and development, the Blackwing Empire already had close to 80,000 orcs living there. This was a huge number. Audiobook could not find any other orc settlement of such a scale. However, even with such a huge population, the orcs were still unable to give birth to a single legend. This was something that Great Chief Gaul could not tolerate. Putting aside the Dragonmaw clan, the Houndfiend clan, the Flying Dragon clan, the Manticore clan, and the Knoll clan, these privileged clans all had legendary creatures serving the empire. However, the orcs did not. Gaul could not think of a solution to the curse. He only wanted to rely on the ancient method of war to give birth to a new hero, a true leader like the wizard Save. He himself was still a bit lacking, let alone the others. Under such circumstances, the orcs' desire became even more fervent. For this reason, after knowing that the empire was about to join the Battle of Ersala, the great tribal chief took the initiative to meet the Black Dragon Emperor and requested to join this operation. After some consideration, the Black Emperor agreed. When Caesar returned to Ersala with the Burning Blade, the alliance was already in a mess. During this period of time, Ersala was in chaos, with all kinds of situations happening frequently. The Metal Dragons, who were in charge of coordinating the various departments, were already in a terrible state. The Wolfheart clan's Karana Burning Mane had mysteriously disappeared. The Taya Kingdom's Kasha Whisperwind was severely injured. The Pinochet Dragon Alex Augusto had mysteriously disappeared, and the Io Kingdom's Nelson Charlie had died at the defense line. Bad news came one after another, and the high-intensity attack plan had been thwarted the moment it was launched. The military alliance had fallen into decline, and the balance of the war was quickly tilting towards Monet's side. It was no wonder that the Platinum Dragon God had the idea of personally taking action. Under such circumstances, few people could remain calm. On the 24th of the 3rd era 1670 of the Iradia calendar, Caesar was sitting in the headquarters of the Bronze Citadel, which was expanding day by day. When the Gold Dragon received news of his arrival, he immediately informed the other leaders of the various departments to hold a roundtable meeting. Soon, important members arrived one after another. Stannis opened the map. Although Monet was unable to take down the Mountain Breaker Citadel, the fall of Io's army was a great blow to the alliance. He has already tasted the sweetness of victory. Over here, the Gold Dragon pointed at a location 300 miles southeast of the Alliance's defense line. The Bronze Monitors had discovered signs of large amounts of monster activity at the northern border of Eschen. After the battle in the Abyss, Monet immediately began to prepare for a new round of attacks. How many? Black Orcs, Viper Dragons, and Hell Spiders. Around 30 to 50,000, Stannis replied. The people who asked the question rolled their eyes. The range of numbers was too large, and there was no value in it. The main reason was that the enemy's Bloodbats and Hell Spiders had very successful anti-detection and stealth abilities. The Monitors were very dangerous. Even Alex could disappear without a trace, and the others could not go deep into the kingdom of EBS to gather more information. The few captives that the Alliance managed to capture were all fierce and crazy beasts, and there was no way to communicate with them. Under the influence of all these factors, it was not easy to spy on the true situation of Monet's army. Does the enemy have a clear target? The King of Butchie continued to ask. Currently unknown. What about the route of the army? Unable to determine. Attack time? Not sure. Stannis kept shaking his head. The Alliance's intelligence was limited to the movements of Monet's army, and they did not know anything else. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to the others, and the confidence of the leaders was greatly damaged. The atmosphere in the Bronze Citadel was almost frozen, and even the Gold Dragon did not know what to say. Have you lost your courage? Caesar asked. It was obvious that he was very dissatisfied with the news of Io's army being almost completely wiped out. When everyone's eyes were focused on him, he looked around and said, I am very confused. Why do I need to know the enemy's clear target, route, and attack time? What makes me even more confused is why the Alliance chose to adopt a defensive strategy. Stannis. He stared at the gold dragon and asked, Isn't the purpose of the metal dragons gathering their allies to eliminate Monet? But let's take a look. What are you doing now? You are actually waiting for the enemy to attack. We do not need to know the enemy's target, route, or attack time. We only need to know how many of them there are, and that is enough. Monet's army gathering is our chance to destroy them. Do you still remember your initial strategy? Attack layer by layer, defend to the death, surround and exterminate them. Stannis, what made you give up on your strategy halfway through? Because, Stannis thought for a moment and sighed. His tone became very distant. We cannot estimate the enemy's strength. We do not know how strong Monet is, or how many of his spawns he has. Our high-intensity, small-scale attack strategy has already failed, and even Alex is trapped in Corvinus Hill. We do not know if she is alive or dead. After repeated attacks, we are already at a disadvantage in terms of strength. Because you are afraid of continuing to make mistakes, you plan to use conservative measures? Caesar replied with a cold smile. He did not expect that even an ancient dragon would be so timid. But then again, being old did not mean that they had rich experience. The minds of long-lived species were not as active as the minds of short-lived species. Under normal circumstances, species like dragons and elves would only be active for 3 to 4 hours a day. The rest of the time, they would be in a daze or in a deep sleep. If they were like humans, long-lived species would most likely die from mental disorder. This also explained why little Luna was always so sleepy. Caesar saw that everyone's eyes were focused on him, waiting for a powerful voice to give the order. He naturally took over the initiative and pointed his claw at Eshen's symbol, saying, There will be no next time. We do not need to wait for Monet's attack. We will take the initiative. He sneered and said, I know that you are all overcautious, calculating the gains and losses. Let me tell you, the Blackwing's Empire will be the main force in this round of attack. Now, gather your troops. We will push the battle line forward again, forcing Monet's army to retreat to the heart of Ibu to defend. If he stops us at all costs, then this will be the final battle. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.